All right, members, guests, I know there's a sensitive subject. We talk a lot about wanting to talk about race issues, and I think that's important. But let's be a model here, right? Let's make sure we conduct it respectfully and talk to each other. That goes for our committee members as well as guests. So thank you. Chairman Garofalo, what's your bill?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Just taking care of a few little housekeeping issues here. Before we get started, if you don't mind, can we take up the amendment set 1588, to put the bill into proper posture so we're all talking about the same thing?
Please read the amendments.
Well, it's a long amendment set, and I can I'll offer them up if
Okay.
it's okay with you.
Sure.
All right, and I can go over them real quick. First off, we're changing the title of the act, and we're not changing it. We're adding a title to the act, which is truly indicative of its meaning, and we're titling it the Every Student is Equal Act. Secondly, we're adding national origin to all the references of race and sex. We're adding national origin in. Third thing is we're better defining some of the definitions in the bill so that it's more precise in its language. And the fourth thing is we're making it effective next school year. With that, I'll take questions on the amendment. And members, I sent over the weekend a copy of the bill, including the amendments, so that you could easily tell where the amendments were. I hope you had a chance to review that.
We have no questions on the amendments. Are there any objections to the amendments? They'll be adopted. They're adopted. Mr.
Back on the
Chairman,
bill.
go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Members, every individual in the Louisiana education system has the right to a learning environment that's free of discrimination. All students are equal. No one student is better than another because of their race, sex, or their national origin. The problem that we're seeing is that some students are being taught that because of the color of their skin, they're inferior to students of different skin colors. Separate is not equal. Learning environments that separate students based on their race, sex, or national origin deepen divisiveness and imply that certain races are incapable of succeeding on their own. That's outrageous. That's the problem we're trying to fix, and it's also racist. The Every Student is Equal Act that we're presenting today simply says that every student is equal and upholds every student's First Amendment freedoms: the freedom of expression, the freedom of thought, and the freedom to question. Louisiana taxpayers whose hard-earned tax dollars fund our public schools need to understand three primary things about critical race theory being pushed in school. First, it's rooted in Marxism. Critical race theory demands a new kind of segregation that divides people based on their race and the color of their skin. It furthers racism and fuels hate. Second, it separates. Again, I'll say it again, separate is not equal. It rejects the fundamental beliefs that we're all equal under the law and should have the same opportunities to prosper. And third, it doesn't lessen poverty and inequality. Instead, critical theory weakens the family, the education community, and the work environment. All American institutions that are critical in preparing individuals of all skin colors to become self-sufficient and successful. The simple truth is that supporting critical race theory is actually creating systemic racism. Louisiana lawmakers, that's us, have a duty and responsibility to protect the right of every individual to a learning environment that's free of discrimination. When our laws fail to protect the right to a discrimination-free learning environment, we're setting our students up for failure. The solution: along with providing a learning environment for every individual that's free of discrimination, there should be more empathy and more understanding for all students. Next, we need more transparency in school curricula to ensure that our schools are teaching content that fosters a civil society where everyone can flourish, regardless of background or skin color. Third, We need more options for parents, the taxpayers who fund our public schools, to provide families with curricular options that fit their needs. As a first step to achieving this solution, we present the bill today, the Every Student is Equal Act. With me at the table, I have first and probably foremost, Mr. Claston Bernard. Claston is an LSU graduate. He's an Olympic decathlon champion. He's a 3-time All-American and a 4-time SEC champion. And he's the author of several books on multiple subjects. Next, we have Mr. Michael Gonzalez to my left. He's a senior fellow at the Heritage Foundation and the author of multiple books, again, on this subject, and has written many articles. And third, we have Mr. Jonathan Butcher, a fellow in education at the Heritage Foundation, who's also published several articles on education. And Mr. Vice Chair, I would ask that we allow my presenters to make an opening statement. Yeah, I think your mic's off.
Be happy to. I just want to make sure we get green cards from you gentlemen.
Oh, we didn't fill out cards?
Did you all fill it?
Okay.
I got yours. Thank you.
We'll
Mr.
definitely make sure that happens.
Go right ahead. Thank you.
You can use the handheld if you want to.
After they present. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is Claston Bernard, and thank you very much for the introduction. And, I'm an immigrant to this country, and the basis of being accepted in any country is first to understand their laws. You come to someone's home, you need to understand how their home operates. It's not for the person in the home to teach you manners. Now, it also says in the 14th Amendment, if you're born and naturalized here, you're an American. And this is always my point that I like to make. As an immigrant, the highest honor you can bestow on anyone coming to this country is for them to be fully accepted into the fold. That means I'm not here to change American foundation. It is for me to say, if I am going to be an American, I have to accept what America comes with. Now, the question is America a racist country? Are the institutions in America a racist country? Well, most people can look at me and see, I'm a black man. They came to my country of birth and offered me an opportunity to come here and better myself. So are the systems racist? Are people capable of evil? There's two different definitions. Only people are capable of evil, not systems, not countries, not America. Because growing up outside of America, I was a kid during the Gulf War, and I remember rooting, I want America to win. Because had America lost that war, where we lived, we'd be in turmoil. America represents a lot more than people fully understand. Now, are there objective truth? There are objective truth. Biblically, it says we're created in God's image. It also says we are of one blood. Scientifically or biologically, it says we're 99.98% similar genetically. We're only 0.12% different genetically. Now, if that is the case, I want to ask a question. It's a rhetorical question. Was MLK Jr. wrong when he says, judge not a person by the color of their skin, but the content of their character? The second thing is, I want to read a statement from someone that wrote this in the root. Whiteness is a public health crisis. It shortens life experiences. It pollutes the air. It contradicts equilibrium. It devastates forests. It melts ice caps. It sparks wars. It flattens dialects. It infests consciousness. And it kills people. This sounds like what they were saying about blacks in the 1840s. And we know what the implications were. We understand the system that blacks had to live through. Now, history is not here to evoke emotional outrage. History is there to learn from. And we need to put it in proper context. This was what the slaveholders were trying to say in order to hold on to the institution of slavery, that blacks are inherently inferior. That is what Charles Darwin's book was about, survival of the fittest race. Now we have flipped it under the guise of smooth talking, pundits, politicians, and academia. who basically are regurgitating the same line of thinking that was so prevalent in the 1840s when racists was trying to hold on to the institution of slavery. Now the Marxists are trying to destroy America, and they're using the flip side, but now they have elite blacks and intellectuals and elite whites pushing this agenda. How can I say that in this country that has given me so much that we are evil? America, come on, America is evil. It's like saying, again, a gun is evil. No, hold the people who commit the crimes responsible. We have to start doing that. So, again, there are issues in this country, don't get me wrong. But we have to move beyond this. You cannot use the same argument that was used to not only hold on to blacks in slavery, but it's also what the Nazi Germans did. They did the same thing with the Jews. Is that the society that we want? How is it that my 8-year-old and my 3-year-old is responsible for her friends who are white? White kids are responsible for what my 8-year-old kids, 8 and 3-year-old kids have done. How? How do we make an argument to say, because of the color of your skin, you are owed something? I've said this before, biblically, legally speaking, the person who commit the crime are responsible. We have to move on. This is divisive. Our school system should be teaching people to think for themselves, not become intellectual slaves that regurgitate useless, divisive facts. So I'm here basically saying the way I see America. America is a beautiful country with a complex history. What bad things? There are bad things that have happened in this country. But I walked in here and was given an opportunity, and people will say, I started at the back of the pack. If that's what they want to say, I started at the back of the pack. I had to come here, learn the system, get myself in the right position legally to be able to do what I'm doing. My race hasn't stopped me. My intellect hasn't stopped me. No man can stop me. So why am I going to tell children that they should live in fear of someone because of their color of their skin? Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you. Hello, and thank you for inviting me to testify. My name is Mike Gonzalez. I am the Angeles T. Arredondo Senior Fellow at the Heritage Foundation. The views I express in this testimony are my own and should not be construed as representing any official position of the Heritage Foundation. I haven't put it into my testimony, but I should add that I'm also a proud immigrant. I'm a proud American, but also a proud immigrant. We came to this country with no money. At the age of 14, none of us spoke English. No issue should concern a healthy society more than the education of its children. They truly will be the leaders of the future. That's not just a cliche. Future Americans should understand that what their country represents, when their country has fallen short of its ideals, and how it has solved its problems when it has strived to live up to them. Pride in the country's many accomplishments will help the people of this diverse country remain together as they strive for common purposes, just as an understanding of past mistakes will help them avoid repeating them. This is what healthy societies do. Much of what we're doing at the moment is very unhealthy, however. We are needlessly sowing dissent and hatred when we should be healing. We're psychologically damaging young children when we should be molding them into future citizens. We're telling non-white children that, quote, worship of the written word, unquote, is a function of white culture when we should be teaching all students to love to learn. The so-called anti-racism curricula and training programs that are sweeping society at the moment across this country are nothing less than forms of workplace harassment of American employees and of child abuse of American students. All of these activities are informed by an ideology known as critical race theory. These ideas are Marxist in origin, as I explained at great length in the written testimony that I have submitted. As all Marxists, the proponents of CRT maliciously manipulate our emotions and our desire to redress past wrongs. These are good desires, but they're being manipulated. But CRT does nothing to close the racial disparities. In effect, if you read these papers, if you do the research, it very quickly becomes clear that these training programs are not intended to close the racial gaps that exist. To give you a sense of how traumatizing CRT can be, I will give you 2 or 3 examples. In Buffalo, the emancipation curriculum taught in public schools told children that all white people play a part in perpetuating systemic racism, unquote. In Virginia, the Department of Education Roadmap to Equity requires that a teacher that does not affirm CRT lose his or her job. In Washington, D.C., the National Museum of African American History and Culture, a Smithsonian institution that we all pay for, until recently told little black children that visited its portal that the idea is that, quote, hard work is the key to success, unquote. The use of, quote, objective, rational, linear thinking, unquote, or that they should be polite, quote unquote, were part of white culture. Is there anything more traumatizing or false than that? The use of reason is what we all have in common. It's a faculty of humanity. The museum, again, took down this damaging material when conservative journalists pointed out what it was doing. Had we not complained, I doubt it would have taken it down. And as a last example, in New York City, a public school principal sent parents a note encouraging them to become, quote unquote, white traitors and help, quote, abolish, unquote, the white race. There are many, many, many examples from across the country, but I have limited time. This should give you a flavor of the ones that I've mentioned here, what is taking place, and why it's right for state officials to launch into action and protect America from this ideology. This is your job. As you can see, the application of these practices can be quite traumatic for young children. All living organisms, including nations and societies, have a right to self-preservation. In our federal system, the individual states have much power and are able to do things the federal government does not do. Education, quite rightly, is one area where the states are sovereign. The 50 states, or better yet, the some 14,000 school boards across the country, have the power and the right to dictate educational policy. In fighting these curricula and trainings, the states are trying to find a way to prevent the dismantling of American society. I want to add, just to close off a little bit to my resume that I gave you. I'm not just an immigrant. I spent 15 years overseas as a foreign correspondent. I have lived in Latin America, Asia, and Europe, in 7 countries overall, if you count years at a time. I want to second what he said. This is a great society. It's got its mistakes. There's room for improvement. But America is just the best place where I've ever lived, and I've lived all over the world. Thank you.
Jonathan Butcher.
I have the card.
Mr. Butcher, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Garofalo, Vice Chairman Wright, members of the committee. My name is Jonathan Butcher, and I'm the Will Skillman Fellow in Education at the Heritage Foundation. The views I express in this testimony are my own and do not reflect an official position of the Heritage Foundation. 2 weeks ago, I talked to a parent in North Carolina named Andrew, not far from the small town of Rockingham, who told me that he is scared to send his kindergartner to school in the fall. And he doesn't have the same jitters that most parents sending their first child off to school have about getting on a school bus or making sure their child makes friends. He's afraid because he thinks that his child may be treated differently because of the color of his skin. He has good reason to be afraid. The local chapter of North Carolina's teacher union is promoting a video that shows actors marching across the stage, smacking a shoe on the floor, and claiming that white parents only want their children to go to school with children like them. Other performers then walk across the stage and mock the idea that students should be evaluated based on their test scores or merit, that it's wrong to move students from grade to grade based on how they read or add and subtract. There is more. North Carolina's Department of Education has posted a resource that represents their position on teaching equity that says, quote, material wealth is associated with being white, which, quote, fosters a sense of white racial entitlement and unearned privilege. Imagine being 5 years old and being told that you and your family are hurting other people because of the color of your skin, not because of how you've treated other people or because of what you've done. This North Carolina parent story is not unique. California State Department of Education officials have designed an ethnic studies curriculum based on the ideas of power and identity. The model lessons teach that ethnic minorities in America are victims because of, quote, forms of oppression in America that, quote, continue to have social, emotional, cultural, economic, and political impacts. Students are taught to identify with more than one group based on their ethnicity and or race, African American, Hispanic, etc., and then the ways in which they can say society oppresses them are multiplied. Educators from California school districts have also created a math curriculum that says teachers should, quote, adapt homework policies to fit the needs of students of color. Similar resources that do not treat children according to their character but the color of their skin can be found around the country, from Michigan to Ohio to Maryland and beyond. This instructional content violates any reasonable interpretation of the Federal Civil Rights Act. Such ideas also reject the sacrifices and guiding principles of those who courageously marched in the civil rights movement, or who strive now to create opportunities for everyone to pursue the American dream, no matter their ethnicity or background. Those who believe in America's creed that all are created equal and entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness should still acknowledge the failure of some in previous generations to live up to this creed. Yet even those who lived through the Jim Crow era and adhered to the civil rights movement's mission say that much has happened in America over the last century. Former civil rights activist and National Book Critics Circle award-winning author Shelby Steele wrote that, quote, the unconscious replaying of our oppression is now the greatest barrier to our full equality. Where do such ideas of systemic oppression and identity politics come from? In the 1920s, a group of German Marxists, frustrated with the failure of the German working class to successfully stage a socialist revolution, created a research institute dedicated to finding what they called a pure form of Marxism. Their radical ideas combine Marx's belief that the world is divided between oppressors and the oppressed based on class, with a postmodern idea that there is no history that can guide us with authentic truths on which we can base our decisions in public and private life today. The Nazis forced what became known as the Frankfurt School out of Germany in the 1930s, and these intellectuals settled at Columbia University in New York. There, the Frankfurt School would influence a generation of professors and students who would add ideas to the original critical theory, creating what is now known as critical legal theory, which argues that American law is systemically oppressive, and critical race theory, which says that everything that happens in society must be seen from a racial perspective. Even today, critical race theorists still cite the worldview's Marxist origins. Professor Angela Harris wrote in 2012, quote, Marx's dazzling analysis of capitalism and his conviction that the laws of historical materialism would bring on the revolution of the proletariat as inevitably as the sun rises are still riveting to contemporary theorists. Educators must recognize critical race theory's Marxist origins. Furthermore, since state and local policymakers are responsible for adopting and authoring academic standards and curricula, they are also responsible for making sure any instructional content does not violate federal law by treating people differently based on immutable characteristics. If racism is systemic in America, if our laws and institutions are still designed to oppress individuals from an ethnic minority status in the United States, then why did the New Orleans School Board pass a resolution to advance racial equity and conduct an equity audit last summer? How could they have found the support for such an idea? How could the Department of Education in California, America's largest state by population, have created an ethnic studies curriculum focused on critical race theory? What about the curricula in North Carolina, Ohio, or Buffalo public schools that was mentioned earlier, and on and on? If racism is systemic, then how could officials have pushed through such ideas? And if racism against a people from an ethnic minority backgrounds was systemic in America, then why would the father of a child in North Carolina, who is white, why would he be afraid to send his child to kindergarten because he's afraid of racism against his child? We should honor the examples of anyone who showed the fortitude to persevere in American history and help this nation honor its creed. Teaching a gospel of victimhood and systemic oppression rejects America's promise. Lawmakers and teachers should make sure this promise defines our classrooms today and the attitudes and choices of the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Butcher. Okay. Chairman Garofalo, I'm going to tease out a little bit of this first, and then we'll take questions if that's fine with you. Okay, let's start with the Marxism part. So essentially the argument is that, you know, Marxism came over from Russia into Germany, Frankfurt School, created the critical theory school, right? Then the critical legal theory, and then now it's critical race theory. So the root is the oppressor versus the oppressed, right? So that's where we are with the idea. So when we throw these terms around, there's a root behind it that you're trying to argue. Okay. I think what I'm trying to understand, and this is gonna be the basis for most of my questions and discussion here, is how this bill has an effect on that, okay? Has an effect on it in Louisiana, in our schools, in our universities, and things like that, right? Because I do, while I agree with a lot of the critique of critical race theory and things like that, I think at the end of the day, I need to think through our schools and how to work with them, right? We agree, Chairman Garofalo and I think, we agree with the free market ideas, right? So at the end of the day, in my opinion, it's more important to see arguments beaten through other arguments and not necessarily by force, right? I think one criticism of the bill and some of the things we're discussing here is that we're sort of using force to stop it, right? And not developing our own arguments against and letting our students, our residents, our people, our legislators access those ideas and see what we agree is truth, right? Would you agree to that?
And that's exactly right. But one of the things I've been struggling with as I brought the bill was how do we fix the problem? How do we take the politics out of the classroom? And you and I did discuss this. And that's one of the reasons why I'm going to return the bill. But I think that we have to have this discussion. For years, this issue has been percolating. And I haven't heard any discussion on it at all as we see system after system, not necessarily in Louisiana, but specifically around the country, enacting different policies and procedures that are furthering this cause. I don't want this to be pervasive in Louisiana. Do I want to force it? I believe in autonomy. No, I flat out. I believe in autonomy. I believe that the locals are closer to their students. However, if the locals are going off in a direction that we as policymakers, elected policymakers in the state of Louisiana, don't believe should be the direction that the state of Louisiana should move in, then I think we have a duty and a responsibility to address that. And that's why I brought the bill. The bill's not, the reason, again, I'll repeat it. One of the reasons why I'm returning it is because I realize that we have more work to do. But that's why we're here at the table to discuss the question you're asking right now. I realize that there may be better ways to do it. That's why I asked initially, if you have a way to help me solve the problem that I'm trying to solve, anybody in the listening audience, please reach out to me. Because I know that it's an issue that's going to, if it's not already being played out, and I don't have evidence that it is, but I've received phone calls that it is. So I don't believe that this is the right thing to do in Louisiana. I think I've enumerated the reasons why. And I'm doing what I can to stop it. What else can you guys add?
Hello? This is about changing the foundation of America. It is plain and simple. Yes, we have a marketplace of ideas, but at what expense? At what cost? Do we need to go back to the Civil War? 700,000 people died as a result of this kind of thinking. Do we need to go back to Nazi Germany when they were warned about this kind of philosophy? Where do we stop? Do we need to go back to Rwanda, or do we need to go back to the Balkans to see what this has done? The reality is to change the culture of America inside out. That's the reality. So we have to understand this is not about force, it's about winning by argument. But when you're telling kids in school that whites are inherently oppressive, okay, whether you think it implicitly or explicitly, you are a racist. You can't defend your position. That is against who we are as humans. It actually assaults our sensibilities. So the reality is we have to look at where the end result of Marxism, whether it was the capitalistic revolution, that never happened. It destroyed and laid waste to many countries and civilization. This is the same philosophy that we're dealing with. So we have to decide what is good for America. What is good for me as an immigrant coming to this country where someone says, you know what? White people are bad. White people are racist. America is racist. What is good about that? When I look at Americans, I see, whether you're white, black, native, whatever, I see Americans. And I deal with you based on face value. That's the conversations we should be having. But when you are beating people, when you are trying to take money away from people, when you're trying to get people fired because of how they were born, they somehow are evil. That shouldn't be taught in schools. I'm sorry. As a parent, you don't that's not an idea. That's indoctrination now, because there's no science, there's no objective truth in that. So we have to look at it from that perspective. As lawmakers, and for me as a parent, my goal is to raise my children to be productive members of society. Education goal is to raise people up to be productive members of society, not dismantle the system that's here. Assimilation is key.
Okay.
And I'll say this one other thing. Either you're an American willing to live by those ideals, or you're ready to destroy it and hand it over to the Marxists.
Okay, we're going to keep it tight, moving on. Okay, let's start with, let's see where the rubber meets the road on some of this. Mr. Bernard talked about, rights and things like that and how we discuss this. I've received a lot of calls, emails, conversations about First Amendment rights in this situation, right? And so First Amendment rights don't guarantee that the person is right? Am I right?
Oh, no, that's freedom of speech.
That's freedom of speech.
Especially
Okay,
political
so
speech, sure.
Especially in a university environment, how do you suggest that something can't be taught without essentially violating some rights? And I mean, I think tenure's tied to this in a classroom. There's a lot of things tied into this that become problematic when it comes to First Amendment rights. Listen, I agree with a lot of what has been written about critical race theory, but at the end of the day, can we force that down? I don't think so.
We should have talked about this before the meeting, but one of the issues that came up last night was the issue of higher ed curriculum. And I am, as I'm sitting at this table right now, of the opinion that this legislature does not have the ability to enforce these rules on higher ed curriculum. So that's one of the changes that I intend to make, is to take higher ed curriculum out. That's not higher ed administration. I'm still amazed, as I'm sitting here today, at how many people, parents, educators, professors, school employees, students, have reached out to me since I filed this bill, encouraging me, supporting me, thanking me, and begging me not to reveal their names because they're afraid of retribution, not only from their colleagues, but from their administrations. They don't want to be fired. They don't want to be reprimanded. So, I don't know that would happen, but I can tell you that the fear is palpable, and they're very concerned about it. So I'm not going to say, obviously, any names today, but it just shows me that this is an issue, and if it hasn't metastasized yet, that we need to do something to make sure that it doesn't. So to answer your question directly, I don't believe at this point that we have the ability to affect higher ed curriculum. So that will be coming out of the bill as it moves forward. And that's one of the things that the speaker and I discussed this morning. So
you're suggesting it would just apply to higher education administration training
for faculty members, because the I won't get into all the details, but essentially the Board of Regents is vested with curriculum decisions in Louisiana.
Understood. And
that's in the Constitution, so unless we have a constitutional amendment, and there could be some federal constitutional issues as well. You brought them up, freedom of speech, freedom of education. So if we take the curriculum, the higher ed curriculum out, then we still, as policymakers for the state of Louisiana, as employees of the state of Louisiana, we still have the ability to affect the administration in higher ed.
Okay, well, let's move on past higher ed education then, K through 12. So in essence, your bill is suggesting that you couldn't talk about critical race theory or any of its components, or that you have to propose the other side. Is that where we're going here?
It doesn't say you can't discuss any concepts, but you have to discuss them as a larger course of action. And it doesn't say the words with balance, but that's the implication. We don't want political opinions. We don't want teachers' opinions. We want facts. We want students to get as much information as possible so they can make an informed decision, so they can learn how to be critical thinkers, so they can improve society. But when you start bringing politics into the classroom, you are setting students up for failure. And I don't know any other way to put it.
How do we enforce something like this? I just see this as a very slippery slope. I mean, there's politics in classrooms since I was in kindergarten, right? I mean, I've had teachers in in high school who said things that were clearly political. I might agree with some of it. Who knows? But I mean, there's a lot of
that's your opinion? No. Did that influence your opinion?
Well, there's a lot of rabbit holes here. So I guess what I'm trying to suggest is, I remember when we were talking about certain bills last session that ultimately were going to be a plaintiff's attorney bonanza because it was going to give an opportunity to sue. I see this as possibly being the case on the opposite side of it, that the first person that's offended or objects to what was said in the classroom that's political, we're following suit, right? Is that not similar in nature to what we're arguing against here?
Okay, quick thing.
If Mr.
Quick thing.
Garofalo, the chairman, wants you to speak, we'll do that.
Sure.
But right now we're talking to the author.
First, the bill specifically says that we're not creating any other causes of action. Secondly, the bill sets up a scheme where Bessie and the individual districts would form the basis and however this would be enforced, and it would be up to them to enforce these rules. If they have, and I'm sure that there are a lot of people here that have problems with that, and they are going to want to talk about it, but that's the way the bill envisions it. Other than that, I mean, Michael wanted to say something. I know Claston wanted to say something as well, if that's okay, Mr. Vice Chair.
Sure. No, go ahead.
Vice Chair, right. One thing that is being missed here is that the implementation of these practices violate existing law. We already have Title VI, which says that institutions that take federal money or government money cannot discriminate on the basis of race, sex, or national origin. These practices do that. We already have, the 14th Amendment, which says that it affords everybody the equal protection under the law. So what is being done violates existing law and statutes.
Okay, I want to make sure we clarify everything that's being said, because I know there's a lot of confusion about what this does and
but
doesn't
to that,
do. So,
I'm not against, I don't think anybody here is against the teaching of CRT. I write a lot about CRT. I would like to see my papers and books taught. I think communism should be taught. I think that we should teach what the ideology of Nazism was. We should have an educated public. These are bad things. Evil exists. But it's applying these things that violate the law.
okay, so when you mentioned the discrimination, clearly teaching is fine, the discrimination based on decisions and training and things like that. Give us some instance. Let's put this in flesh, what this would look like, how it would affect an actual situation.
Well, I think, for example, a curriculum in New York, a training in New York of teachers, which said that love of the written word was a function of white culture. Or in another example, I forget in which state, which said that reason it was a function of white culture. I think telling a child that violates the Title VI. I think that is also traumatizing. I think that it is a bad signal to send to a non-white child that the use of reason, which is a human faculty shared by all 7 billion of us, is something for whites only. First of all, it's false. Second of all, it's traumatizing and it violates Title VI. Is that a good example?
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, again, I still see rabbit holes and some slippery slopes, but okay, fair enough. That's a decent example.
Well, you said there's a slippery slope and there's a First Amendment rights, okay? There are actually universities that are doing re-education with their faculties because they feel offended. Students feel offended because of what is being taught. So there are actually clear actions going on as we speak. So yes, you want ideas to be in the university. That's what universities are about. But when you have whole faculties and staff actually being put through re-education, because that's again what the Nazis, now it's actually not just a theory, it is in the practice.
Okay, these examples, are there any in Louisiana?
It doesn't matter if it's in Louisiana, it's coming. And I know the language.
Fair enough. We are dealing with the state of Louisiana. We're dealing with our institutions. Okay. We got to focus on
well,
that. So,
you know what? Here's the thing. Again, I could use personal experiences, but the fact is, this is being taught. I was told that as an immigrant coming here, hey, white people are bad. Do you think that's a good thing to say about a country as America? America is inherently evil. Is that the message? Do you understand what happens when someone sets you up? Then everyone you look at through the lens that they have something out to get. That's not a good thing.
And Jonathan had an example he wanted to share with you, if you want it, Mr. Vice Chair.
Please, go ahead.
Mr. Vice Chair, earlier this year, the U.S. Department of Education opened an investigation into a school district in Illinois where a teacher had complained that the school district had created an affinity group where they split the white teachers and students and provided different material to them from the African American and other ethnic minority students and teachers, and provided different material, so different instructional content and training to the groups based on race. The U.S. Department of Education opened an investigation into that. That was closed after the new administration took over later in January. So that would be one example where already federal oversight is inquiring into how states are adhering to federal law and what is happening under these diversity trainings.
Okay. All right, thanks. I'm going to go to questions now. Representative Freeman. Are you on?
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. And Chairman Garofalo, we did have a conversation on the floor about this yesterday. 98% of my district sent me emails opposing this vehemently. And what I have a couple questions, but since we're into reading statements today, Mr. Acting Chair, if you would let me read a partial statement from the Teacher of the Year for the state of Louisiana, who teaches at Ben Franklin School. And last year in 2020, he was awarded the Teacher of the Year by the entire state, and he teaches history. So I'm going to not read the whole thing because it's a little bit long, but I think it's essential as I represent my district to let you know where the opposition lies. His name is Chris Dyer, and he teaches at Ben Franklin. He's Louisiana Teacher 2020 of the Year. This bill defines training as the teaching and education of a student or employee by means of lecturing or textbooks, audiovisual materials, or any other kind of reference materials. Much of HB 564 is plagiarized from Section 2 of Donald Trump's Executive Order 13950, which was recently revoked. That either the United States of America or the state of Louisiana is fundamentally, institutionally, or systematically racist or sexist. This arbitrary wording is paradoxical. It implies racism and sexism exist, especially when educators discuss them as pervasive problems. But it renders it illegal to teach that these are issues that are fundamental, institutionalized, or systematic. As a history teacher, a United States history teacher, history teachers have an obligation to provide students with the truth of the foundation of our country, scars and all. In 1787, the framers included the Three-Fifths Compromise in the Constitution. This infamous compromise was an agreement between northern and southern states that the enslaved population, over 500,000 souls, would be represented as 3/5 of a person in the House of Representatives. Granting slaveholding states the right to count 3/5 of their enslaved population in terms of representation provided these states overrepresentation in national politics. The compromise dehumanized people based on race. It was blatantly racist. Thus, it is a clear example of institutionalized systematic racism that was fundamental to the founding of our country. Denying women the right to vote or divorce abusive husbands was a decision also left to institutions. These simply were not practiced by a few bad apples. It was legitimized and perpetrated by institutions. It was systematic by definition of the word system. Ignoring the systematic nature of these issues and attributing them solely to a few misguided individuals is not only inaccurate, but it prevents us from addressing them. At a practical level, the implementation of this bill gets muddled in legalistic terms. Are we supposed to teach that systematic racism and sexism exist, but they are divorced from Louisiana and the United States? Or is this bill written from a perspective denying that institutionalized racism and sexism exists at all? In either case, a governing body crafting legislation outlawing the teaching of the realities based on these viewpoints epitomize institutionalized racism and sexism. that an individual should be made to feel discomfort, guilt, anguish, or any other form of psychological or emotional distress on account of their race or sex is wrong. This legislation will pave the way for suppression of Black and Indigenous history. History is already marginalized in school. And I'm still reading on behalf of Chris Dyer. I, as a white man, often experience discomfort as a history teacher, and I have learned to embrace and utilize it in productive ways. On the first day of class, I notify students that teaching authentic history will inevitably cause discomfort and that we must embrace it. Discomfort, when understood, is a powerful weapon and often leads to productive action. Teachers should not deny our students history because it may cause discomfort. It's our task to grapple with it together. Lastly, this bill adds an additional burden to an already arduous profession and carries heavy implications. It implies that teachers in schools are broadly engaging in unpatriotic behavior and that strict legislation is necessary to curtail it. If it's an issue, then why is this reactionary legislation needed? It reeks of those who feel whiteness is under assault and needed to go on the offensive. If teachers are believed to have violated this legislation, who in the government would be qualified to determine guilt? What will be the consequence? How would they be reprimanded? Would they simply be fired? Would they be brought in front of a committee? That's the statement that I'm reading. I do have questions along with his, but I felt very strongly that I should read the Teacher of the Year of Louisiana's statement on this topic. So I know that Mr. Acting Chair actually asked some of the questions that were on my mind about how are we going to enforce this and what it does. That's one of my questions. And my other question, I can direct it towards Mr. Butcher because I'm a mom of 4 children, and you do get afraid sometimes for different things that might happen to your children in school. My youngest child is now 20 years old. I hear what you say about this gentleman, Andrew, in North Carolina, and his fear. He doesn't live in the state of Louisiana. I have not heard any testimony saying that this has happened to any parent or child in the state of Louisiana. And so I can imagine being afraid of something that might happen to one of my children, but I cannot imagine not teaching them all of the real facts of history. So my first question is, how are we going to police this?
First off, let me address some of the issues that you brought up already in Mr. Dyer's statement. Number one, plagiarizing. Look, I think that's a strong word because we all look for ways to craft legislation, and this bill actually was crafted from a bill in Florida, a bill in Iowa, New Hampshire, Ohio, and Missouri. I didn't even know that that President Trump had passed that executive order until maybe 3 days ago when somebody told me. So I think that that's a little disingenuous for Mr. Dyer, who is a constituent of mine, to write something like that to try to make this look bad. Secondly, this bill does not say anything about teaching facts. You can teach the good, and you should teach the good, the bad, the ugly. You can even talk about the theories, but you can't say that theories are facts. You can teach facts as facts. You can teach theories as theories. Third, we've already addressed the questions of how it's going to be enforced. Again, the bill sets out that Bessie and the individual districts will set up policies and procedures to enforce this. So I understand Mr. Dyer's concerns, and again, we're taking all of those concerns into consideration. But I think that he's a little strong on his assertions, and I hope he read the bill and understands what it does, and I hope he's watching the testimony today to understand the responses to his questions. With that, I'll let Mr. Butcher answer the question directed at him.
Madam Representative, so what was your question?
Are there any parents or children who have contacted you from the state of Louisiana to say that they're fearful of their children going to school?
No.
Thank you. That's the question. My next question is...
May I?
Yeah.
Parents have talked to me, not about being afraid of their students going to school, but about their students being afraid to speak up in the classroom and say something that may contradict what the teacher's telling them. And I have several teachers who have contacted me about not being able to say anything for fear of retribution from their peers, their colleagues, and their superiors. So I know that there are things going on. I can't document it because these people are very afraid of retribution, but I know what's going on. In fact, that's what kind of started the whole process, is some teachers had contacted me asking me to look at this and try to figure out a way to stop it.
Okay. Well, thank you for that clarification, Mr. Chairman. Does HB 564 jeopardize the accreditation of our colleges and universities?
I don't know. I don't think so. Y'all have experience from other states?
Madam Representative, my understanding is no, it would not jeopardize the accreditation of it. It's common for administrators at public universities to create student handbooks and guidebooks for student conduct on campus. And so if a student handbook adopted the material from this proposal, it would simply say that any action or conduct on campus could not violate federal law in terms of discrimination, and reference the Federal Civil Rights Act.
And Mr. Acting Chair, could we ask someone from higher ed to answer that question when we get to the cards as well? I'm sure I see many people from higher ed.
Representative Freeman,
again-
may I make a suggestion? We have a lot of cards, and I know higher ed is going to come talk. Can we ask when they get up?
Yes,
Pull 'em up?
Yes, that's
as-
exactly
Oh, I'm
what
sorry, I
asked.
missed
That's
that.
exactly what I asked for.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
Okay,
Okay.
that's okay. Thank you.
And Representative Freeman and Mr. Vice Chair, I've already said that, as far as curriculum goes, we're going to pull higher ed curriculum out of the bill because I don't believe that we have the authority in this body to adjust that. So you may not have been in the room when I said it.
I was,
So
yeah. I might have
I
missed that.
apologize, but I wanted to
Okay.
make sure you knew that.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
because we want to make sure that we're not doing anything to go against the Constitution of Louisiana or the U.S. Constitution.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. What criteria are used to determine whether topics are divisive enough to fall under the crosshairs of this legislation?
Y'all have a flavor from other states.
Representative, I'd like to address something in that letter. There's several falsehoods there. He said,
Actually, I'd prefer if you just answer the question.
no,
that I
just for a
asked.
second, please, because you want to get truth. We're here to speak candidly. So allow me to speak candidly.
Well, actually, I asked a question, and I would like for
No,
my question to be
Mr.
answered.
I will
Bernard,
answer it.
we're
I will
gonna-
answer it. I will
yeah,
answer
we're
it.
gonna have to
But
keep it tight.
Yes,
So
I will
please
keep
answer
it
the
tight.
question.
But
That's
we're
how the
here.
committee works.
Yeah, but we're here to get truth. Okay, just give me a moment. I listened to the professor's statement. That's critical race theory that was just read. That's the basis of critical race theory that he just read, that he wrote and in his opposition. That's what it is. So the question is: in America, a racist country, are white people inherently racist? The other thing is the 3/5 clause. We know that's not what it represented.
It's out of,
Yeah, he's out of order.
He's out of order.
Order, Mr. Acting Chair. Do I need to walk out again?
No, sir. Go ahead.
Point of order. We had a member asking questions. She asked that the questions be asked tight. You asked that the questions be asked tight. And I asked that everyone here respect everyone here, especially the members of this committee. Thank you.
I concur with Representative Carter. We do need to tighten that up.
My question.
Go
should I
ahead,
go back to
Representative Freeman,
that?
please.
Thank you,
Ask
Mr.
your
Acting
question.
Chair. My question is, what criteria is used to determine whether topics are divisive enough to fall under the crosshairs of this legislation? That was my question. And if you want to talk offline later, Mr. Bernard, fine. But on this mic, we're asking questions.
Thank you, Representative Freeman. If I may address that, I think any statement by a teacher, any application of a training or of curriculum that violates the fact that we're not supposed to discriminate on the basis of race, sex, or national origin, as stated in Title VI. In a lot of these curricula and trainings clearly do. I think that obviously would offer a clear line as to what is divisive, or a better term would be violative of existing law.
I'm not quite sure that answered my question, but
Well, the definitions in the bill are very specific, starting on page 1, where it talks about the divisive concepts in education. We tried to make them as tight as we could, and again, I'm asking for suggestions on how we can tighten them up. But that's the concepts that we're trying to define as being divisive.
okay. Well, they seem vague to me. So,
Well, any suggestions you have are more than welcome, Representative Freeman.
I will have to oppose this bill,
I
Mr. Chairman. You know that.
I'm asking you to try to help me accomplish my goal. And if you
I'll be
feel-
happy to
regardless
talk
of
to
whether
you
you
about it.
oppose it or not, I'd appreciate it if you help me.
Earlier, and I think it was Mr. Butcher's testimony, you mentioned the New Orleans School Board had a racial equity resolution. Can someone, Mr. Chairman, you or someone
I
else
didn't read
speak
it,
to that,
so, yeah.
please?
In 2020, in June 2020, there was an announcement on the New Orleans School Board's website, the district's website, that they had passed an equity resolution that suggested that America is systemically racist.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that.
I'd be happy, Representative Freedom, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, I'd be happy to provide that material to the committee.
Please do. Thank you.
Is that a sign?
Might be. I think it is. We do.
Representative Edmonds, do you have a suggestion for us?
Representative Freeman, are you still questions?
My final question is, what problem are we really trying to solve for the state of Louisiana?
For me, I think I've stated it already. The problem is politics in the classroom. Our classrooms should give students as much information as they possibly can about math, science, reading, history. All of those subjects should be taught from a factual basis, giving students the best opportunity to succeed in life. And when you bring politics into that, one way or another, with any one of those subjects, you're indoctrinating students, you're trying to bring them into a single way of thinking, and that's setting them up for failure. And I don't think it's fair to the students, and I don't think it's good for the history or the future of the state of Louisiana. And that's the purpose and the primary goal of this bill, to make sure that they don't have to face discrimination. They have an environment that's equal for, regardless of your skin color, your nationality. Everybody gets treated equally, and that they're not trying. We don't have professors and teachers that are trying to indoctrinate them into a certain way of thinking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Acting Chair.
Representative Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. Thank you, Chairman Garofalo, for bringing this concept or this discussion here today. And let me ask some questions about it. I'm highly opposed to it, as we already discussed, but I know you have some amendments to it. Mm-hmm. The first amendment is you changed the name of the act. It's the Every Student is Equal Act. So if we pass this legislation, is every student in Louisiana equal?
This bill is
Yes.
attempting to make every student in Louisiana equal, yes.
If we pass this, every student in Louisiana will be equal under this.
As far as opportunity goes, education, their opportunity to receive a balanced education and to learn in an equal learning environment, discrimination-free, yes. That's the goal.
Is every student in Louisiana currently equal?
I hope so.
Are there some students who go to A schools and some students that go to F schools?
Yes.
Are those students equal?
I would say that I hope that the students are equal.
Is the opportunity given to them from the state of Louisiana equal?
We're trying our best to do that, yes.
Would you consider them equal, the opportunities, if the state of Louisiana provides to one student go to F school, another one an A school, is that an equal opportunity?
You know, that's one of the things. You've been on this committee long enough, working with me. When I heard the number that we have 133,000 students in D and F schools, I think you saw the look on my face. I was shocked at that number. And since I found that out, I've been working very closely with Dr. Brumley and the Department of Education to try to correct that. I will have very shortly an HCR that I'm going to drop that asks the department to look at the A, B, and C schools in underperforming and lower disadvantaged districts, find out what they're doing right, pick out the best practices from those districts, and hopefully try to apply those best practices to the D and F schools. Dr. Brumley and the department has an idea of the problem in the D and F schools, or some of the problems, but they want to do more studies, and they're working with me on this resolution. It's going to drop very soon. So to answer your question, I can't accurately tell you because I'm not in the schools. I
No,
can tell you.
my question was from just a simple yes or no. From your perspective as chairman of the education committee, if there are if Louisiana is providing to one student an A school opportunity and another student an F school, is that equal opportunity? It's a simple yes or no from your perspective. I'm curious to know your answer to it.
Am I a hostile witness here?
No, I'm asking as an
well, then
open-ended
let me
question.
answer the question
Sure.
that I think it has to be answered in.
Yes.
I think we're doing our best. Is our best good enough? It's not.
But
I think we're doing our best.
So-
And that's the only answer I can give you at this point, Representative Carter. I'm not in the Department of Education. You know, we're policymakers. We're not administrators. I can't answer for what's going on with administration. I can tell you we're talking about it, and I can tell you that everyone that I speak to in the Department of Education believes that they want to improve that number and they want to help the students. And as long as I'm chairman, as long as I'm in this legislature, I will continue to work in that direction.
And since you've been chairman, what have you done to improve the education quality of those DNF schools in particular?
Me personally, I've just enumerated it. I mean, we're working on legislation and policies that are going to improve all schools, not just the DNF schools. But I've worked very close. That's almost very close to being a personal question. I mean,
No, I'm
Representative
asking.
Carter, I'm surprised at that from you. To be
No,
honest
it's
with
not
you.
a personal question, but
Well-
I'm just asking, like, you have this legislation, the chairman of education has legislation saying every student is equal at. And so I'm struggling to get the very first answer to the question, and that is whether or not currently every student in the state of Louisiana is treated equally as
You
it comes to
talking about
educational
outcomes
opportunity.
or opportunity? You know, if you're talking
We're
about
talking about-
outcomes,
I'm talking about opportunity.
the deal is the
Allow me
bill
to-
is dealing with opportunity, not outcomes. You're talking about more about outcomes than with opportunity. I'm dealing with opportunity. My goal is to give every student the equal opportunity to succeed, not only in school but in life.
Well, let's get beyond the title of your act and let's get into some of the
We can go to the
substance
next
of it.
question, then I'm sure.
So if I'm looking at page 1, beginning at line 18,
Is this before amendments or after amendments?
I don't know. I don't know if this was changed. You tell me if this was changed in the amendments.
Oh, okay.
I have the original legislation in front of me. It states that divisive concepts shall include, and this is one of them, this is line 18, part B, that either the United States of America or the state of Louisiana is fundamentally, institutionally, or systematically racist or sexist. Did I read that correctly?
Yes,
Was that amended in any
No.
way, or is that still part of it?
that's still part of it.
My question is this. Is it true in the past tense? Was the state of Louisiana ever fundamentally, institutionally, or systematically racist, in your opinion?
Again, the bill says that you can talk about these concepts, but you can't teach it as fact unless it's fact.
I'm just asking, like, you say I'm asking was the state of Louisiana ever fundamentally, institutionally, or systematically racist or sexist?
If you have facts that show that, you can teach it.
I'm asking, from your perspective.
From my perspective, I'm not a history teacher. So, you know, you can't ask me a history question that I may not have that fact to.
But
what
you
I'm telling
drafted
you is
this
what the bill says that if it's a fact, you can teach it.
And my question, though, is from your perspective, is it a fact, one way or the other? I'm not trying to put
Representative
words in
Carter,
your mouth.
I've already answered that question.
Well,
That's not for me to decide.
I know you just asked whether or not I'm treating you as a witness. This is not a court of law. I'm just trying to have a conversation
I
with
know,
you.
and that's not an issue for me to decide.
Well,
I'm not a history teacher.
Well, it sounds like you would acknowledge, though, right, that the state of Louisiana was fundamentally, institutionally, and systematically racist in the past.
Look,
right? Well, I mean, I'm asking, would you agree with that?
I'm not a history teacher. I'm not a history scholar. So the bill doesn't pick what is fact and what is not fact. What is
Well,
theory. The goal of the bill is to make sure students are receiving facts.
And this is what I was ultimately trying to get at.
Well,
if I'm
please ask the
looking at
question,
if I'm looking
Representative
at your bill, and it has on line 18, it has the word is. That's a present tense word, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm asking whether or not if we had a was there instead of an is, whether or not this would be a true
No,
statement.
well, I can tell you that the way the bill is worded is the way that we want it to be.
I-
Because I can tell you right now, absolutely, I do not believe that the state of Louisiana or the United States of America is systematically or fundamentally racist.
And my question is, would that statement be true if it was a was there instead of an is?
And I understand your question,
And-
and
and-
I've
and-
already answered your question.
And my question, my real question, what I'm trying to get at to you is, when did it switch from was to is not? I mean, when did that?
I've answered that
was
question.
there? Was
the
there?
answer is the same. I'm not a history teacher. I'm not a history scholar. So that's not up for me. I haven't researched it. If you give me a day, I'll research it and I'll give you an answer.
I'm just trying to get from you, and allow me to finish my question, please. When did it switch in your mind from was to is not anymore?
Asked and answered. You've asked the question and I've answered.
This
it.
isn't a court of law.
I
I mean,
know.
you're testifying about a bill that you want us to
And
vote upon, and we don't have a
I've
judge.
answered the question, though, Representative Carter. So if it's not the answer that you want, I can't help that, but I've answered the question.
Okay, well, let's go to page 2. Let's begin at line 4. That an individual should be discriminated against, favored, or receive deferential treatment solely or partly based because of the individual's race or sex. Was that changed in the amendment?
Yes.
That's Part C.
I don't want to see that.
I don't see a change. You had a change?
I think national origin was added. May have been added.
And here's my
National origin should have been added to that.
well, let me ask you. Here's my question. The same as before. Has the state of Louisiana ever discriminated against, favored, or given an individual preferential treatment, differential treatment because of an individual's race or sex, either positive or negative?
I apologize. I was looking at the wrong document. And yes, we did add national origin to that. So I'm sorry, Representative Carter. Can you repeat the question?
Has the state of Louisiana ever discriminated against, favored, or given differential treatment to an individual solely or partly because of the individual's race or sex?
Same answer. And we
What's
can
the
go
answer?
down. We can go down every one of them, and you can ask the same question, and it's going to be the same answer. I'm not a history teacher. I'm not going to sit here and opine on what I believe happened in the past because I haven't researched it.
Has the state of Louisiana or of any of its agencies ever
I've
discriminated?
answered the question.
I didn't get finished asking.
You
Has-
asked this. It's the same question you asked on the first
Mr.
one.
Chairman, before we started, we had a meeting in the back, and you said, let's have a polite conversation. And
And
I'm doing my best to ask quiet, polite questions.
Okay.
But you're not the judge where you get to decide objection overruled. I mean, I'm asking you to help us understand this. And my question is, looking at your legislation, page 2, beginning at line 4, you state that an individual you're talking about an individual, we should not have this divisive concept that an individual should be discriminated against, favored, or receive differential treatment solely or partly because of the individual's race or sex. And my simple question to you is whether the state of Louisiana or any of its agencies has ever discriminated against, favored, or given differential treatment to an individual solely or partly because of the individual's race or sex. That's a simple yes or no from your opinion, sir.
I'm not here to offer opinions. I'm here to answer questions. The
Okay.
answer to that question is I'm not a history teacher. I have not researched that issue. And that's not a question that I am going to entertain at this point because I can't answer that question.
Do you acknowledge that the state of Louisiana or any of its agencies has discriminated against, favored, or given differential treatment to individuals solely or partly because of the individual's race?
I will give you the same answer.
Which is what?
That I'm not a history professor. I haven't researched that issue. We're talking about present day. We're talking about moving forward into the future with this bill. And that's not an issue that I'm here to deal with and answer on this bill.
The next sentence, the next one, page 2, beginning at line 6, part E. It's another divisive concept that should not be taught in our schools, according to your legislation, that an individual of one race or sex should be treated disrespectfully regarding that individual's race or sex. My first question is, was that revised in any way in the amendments?
Yes.
How is it revised?
We added national origin.
And my question to you is whether or not the state of Louisiana has ever treated an individual disrespectfully because the person is of the person's race or sex.
Same answer.
Which is what?
Same. I've repeated it.
Do you acknowledge that
many
the
times.
state of Louisiana or its agencies has disrespected individuals because they are females,
Same answer.
or that they're African American?
Same answer.
Which is what? Do you acknowledge whether or not there's been discrimination or disrespectfulness aimed at individuals purely or partly because of their race or sex?
Representative Carter, if that has happened and it's a fact, the students should be taught that.
But do you acknowledge whether or not that has happened in
Whether
the past?
I acknowledge it or not has nothing to do with this bill.
You said that you made an amendment to add an individual's race or sex. You added national origin. You have race.
Added national origin to race and sex.
So we have a protection for race. We have a protection for sex, and you have an amendment to also protect national origin.
The amendment has been adopted.
Do you have also an amendment that includes sexual preference?
No,
Why not?
nobody asked me to.
I'm asking you to now. Would that be an amendment that you
I
would
would talk
consider?
to the people that I'm working with, and as we do with all of our bills, to find out how that would affect the outcome of the bill, just as I'm doing now with. That's why we're going to.
But before you go cuddle,
return this bill to the calendar, and I'm doing the same thing. So if you would like that as an amendment, I would definitely consider it after I talk to the people who are advising me, do a little research myself to find out the implications of that.
Before you meet
then
with,
I would consider it.
Before you meet with advisors and people and stuff like that, just as the chairman of education, would you support an amendment to include protection for race, sex, national origin, and for those for sexual preference?
Again, I would have to research it to find out the implications and how it would affect the outcome of the bill and whether or not it would accomplish the goal that I'm trying to accomplish.
What kind of research would you need to do?
Mr. Vice Chair, I mean,
I don't think I'm asking disrespectful questions.
I don't think it's disrespectful at all, but I mean, we're belaboring the point, and I've stated that I would have to do research. And I've stated why. I would like to know the implications of what that change would mean to this bill, and if it would further the goal of this bill or hinder the goal of this bill.
Let me ask you. We heard testimony last week, and I think it was our first education meeting for this 2021 legislative session, that there's a literacy crisis in the state of Louisiana. Do you remember that testimony?
Literacy crisis? Who testified to that?
Illiteracy crisis in the state of Louisiana. The reading rate, the literacy rate here in the state of Louisiana.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about that. No.
Does this legislation do anything to address the literacy rate here in the state of Louisiana?
To the extent that it deals directly with that, no. To the extent that that it provides an anti-discrimination or a discrimination-free environment, possibly.
Does anything in this legislation help deal with the early education funding crisis we have here in the state of Louisiana, us not providing enough resources and funding towards early education? Does anything in this legislation help to fix that early education funding crisis that we have?
Same answer, Representative Carter.
Which is what?
Look, that this bill is not dealing with early education. It's dealing with a discrimination-free environment in the classroom.
I've heard from many of our schools, many of the parents, many of the schools and school leaders in my district, and one of their immediate concerns is it's a crisis. It's not even a concern. It's a crisis. Is many schools have lost contact with the number of kids when we went to virtual learning, that the enrollment rate has dropped off, which is one of the reasons why the MFP is reduced this year, historically reduced. My question is whether or not anything in this legislation attempts to solve the COVID loss of student crisis that we're currently facing in the state of Louisiana.
No.
And yet You know, you said earlier that you want to get politics out of the classroom. You know, I want to get politics out of the legislature so we can get some real stuff done, like fixing our literacy, like funding early education, like trying to solve the crisis of our kids not having the educational resource that we have. And you have such a great opportunity as chairman of the education committee to take on these sorts of challenges and solve them. But I'm disappointed that we're engaged in such divisive legislation. And so I'm glad this is a good day, because it's my understanding you have voluntarily agreed to defer this bill.
Representative Carter, if I could count, if I had a dollar for every time I've heard that statement in this body, I'd be a wealthy man.
Good.
Okay? So I understand your point, and I understand the point you're trying to make, but we can walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. We can solve multiple problems at the same time. We all try to do that. I know you do, and I know you work hard at it. So to
where's
say
your
that,
other
to
part
say
of it?
that we're
Where's,
not...
where's your other piece of the legislation dealing with the literacy? I know you have another divisive bill coming, I believe, next week or so, regarding the students, the transgender kids, and
Not
that's
me.
That's not you?
No.
Okay. All
Try
right,
to
well,
stay on the bill. All right.
So no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Owen. Representative Jefferson, I'm asking you to come chair while I walk to the back.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I won't take but a minute. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank the whole audience for being here, and for people throughout Louisiana who've raised their voices as this has begun. I want to address real quickly something that was read by Representative Freeman from the Teacher of the Year, who I applaud sticking his hand up and wanting to provide input. But I think things were said out of context that need to be clarified. He did mention some horrible things that have happened in our country. Yes, the 3/5 thing was awful. Y'all would agree on that. But, you know, throughout the course of our country, we have fixed problems. We have worked to fix problems. The Emancipation Proclamation, the 13th, the 14th, the 15th, and the 19th Amendments were things where blood was shed to fix some of the problems. And he talked about it. He even talked about women not even having the right to vote. But the context of his letter, he didn't realize, he didn't go through the rest of that, saying that, you know, we as a free society, as a republic, have the chance to raise issues, to discuss them, to confront them, and to solve them. And a lot of blood was shed getting those things done. There's lots of other terrible things that have happened in our country, and I'm not here to indict the United States. But Woodrow Wilson's Sedition Act was terrible. Jailing Japanese citizens was terrible. Jim Crow was awful. Bad things have happened in Louisiana, across this country, but we as a free society have come together to try to keep our society free and to try to move forward. And that's what I see this doing here. I haven't heard anyone saying we're going to exclude teaching a subject. We're going to say, what I hear you guys saying we need to do is not make that subject the foundation of education. That would be like saying we're going to make Marxism the foundation of our social studies education. That's what CRT does. It's okay to teach it as a subject. It has to be taught. It's okay to teach socialism, communism, nihilism, Shintoism. It's about education. It's about giving these students baseline information of what's there and let them objectively decide what is truth. Because ultimately, we're trying to expose these children to truth so they can become, as Mr. Bernard says, productive members of society. And to me, I think that's where we're heading for. I will say this real quickly. I cherish academic freedom. One of the things I do to keep bread on the table is I teach. I teach for a number of private Christian colleges. I teach for the Air Force's War College. And every term when I go in, I tell my students, you have academic freedom. Challenge me. I do not have to agree with you, and you don't have to agree with me. Prove me wrong. And we have respectful dialogues, which is what we have to do in this country as we go forward. Okay? We've made lots of mistakes, but, you know, my feeling is we gave this country to God when we started. And God is going to continue to guide us if we continue to hold on to Him. And continue to seek the truth and not suppress the truth. Yes, as I said, we've had bad moments in this country and bad things have been done to lots of people. But we try to fix them, and we will continue to try to fix them, which is why we're here. And why we're in this education committee, to improve education in Louisiana and to give kids a better education. I don't have any questions. That's just what I wanted to tell you all. Thank you all for coming to Louisiana, and thank all of you for coming today. I know we've got a lot more to do, but I appreciate you coming and caring enough to show up. Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair.
Thank you, Representative Owen. Okay, we have no more. Representative Phelps, you have a question? Is that right? Go ahead.
I guess I'm a little still as unclear today as I was yesterday of the reason for the bill, and I don't know if it's been answered clearly or not, Mr. Chairman. The reason for the bill is it to take politics out of the classroom? Can you just give me that short answer again? The reason for bringing this bill forward, if it passes, it will do what?
Number one, to provide a discrimination-free environment for everybody in the educational system, including teachers, employees, everybody. Number two, to provide equal opportunity to every student, regardless of the color of their skin, so that they're not being told that one student is better than another student because they happen to be a different color. And number three, yes, I am trying to take politics out of the classroom because I think there are certain factions in this country that are trying to creep into the classrooms to teach an ideology that's not based in fact, but it's based in ideology. Those are the three primary purposes of this bill.
Okay, so, and we're not sure if that has been done in Louisiana. You're saying
I'm saying I've had anecdotal reports that it's being done, primarily from employees and faculty members, and a couple of parents, but I'm also saying that I've been implored not to release any district information or personal information because they're all afraid of retribution.
and we did talk about that, because I don't know how that's going to do that. Going back to our conversation, educators know, and it's like teaching 101. It's not about someone's personal opinion. You know, you're teaching from a textbook of which has been approved by the district, by the state. People in those areas have gone through the books with a fine-tooth comb in order to teach it, correct?
Well, I haven't been through that training, so I can't answer that question directly, but I don't doubt anything you're saying, Representative Phelps.
Okay, well, when the district or the state decides to approve the textbooks, that's done through a process of someone knows what's in those textbooks. Anything outside of that with teaching, which as we've shared, I think most teachers know that their personal opinions are not shared within the teaching of those topics.
And
correct.
What most people know, what most teachers know, is not all teachers. And the fact that we have, I'm not trying to indict the teachers in Louisiana. I am trying to say that this is a problem that we're seeing around the country, not only by teachers, but by school boards, by institutions that are making these decisions on behalf of students. And they're deciding what students should be taught, and they're teaching theories as facts.
Okay,
and
that's outside of Louisiana, though, right? But we're having the conversation
outside of Louisiana, other than the people that have contacted me. Yes.
Okay. And maybe that's a part of what's. Well, let me go back to that. So most teachers know that that's not accepted in the state of Louisiana.
And again, I'll take your word for that. But
and if there was, I think I don't know if this bill was to. How would it patrol that if it was going on, other than there's no cameras and speakers in the room, other than children going home to say this teacher made me feel this way by saying that. That's the only way we would know that, correct, at this point.
Look, I think I told you yesterday when we had the discussion that I've asked the question from both superintendents and from our state superintendent of education, how do we know what teachers are teaching in the classroom? And after the Department of Education prescribes the different flavors of a curriculum, and then that is transmitted down to the districts, and the districts make a decision as to which flavor they want. How do we know that the teachers are following what the district chooses?
Right.
And the answer that I'm receiving to that question is we don't know. Okay. And there's no way that we can guarantee a teacher. Do you want to?
And even if this bill passes, and it's okay, just 1 second, please. If this bill passes, that still would not address that part.
But that doesn't
correct?
mean we shouldn't address the problem.
No, I understand where you're going, I guess I don't know, but this bill would not alleviate that problem.
Of us not knowing what a teachers teach?
Right.
Yes, but again, I'm
would
trusting you in you telling me that most teachers are not doing anything outside of the curriculum.
Right.
I'm trusting you on that.
Okay.
I don't know.
And so if there was, and you believe that too, there would be no reason for this bill.
If it was a perfect world, we
Okay.
probably wouldn't have any
I'm
bills
just
in
trying
here.
to get all these thoughts together because they're everywhere. Okay, so let me go back, and I just wanted to make a few points. With the letter from the teacher of the year in history, I so respect those comments because I'm sitting here thinking that was another question, like how would a teacher even teach African American history? There's some high schools that have African American studies.
Well, I
and
can
different
address
cultures.
that. The way they teach it is they teach the facts as they occurred, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the students should get all of that. And I think we talked about this yesterday. You know,
Right, so what else
I'm
would they
not
be
saying you
getting?
can't teach history. I'm not saying you can't talk about theories. I'm not saying any of that. All I'm saying is that the teacher's personal opinion should not be imparted to the students, especially if that opinion is based on a political ideology.
Okay.
You have something you wanted to add?
No, he doesn't right now. I'm sorry. No. So with that being said, again, there's no way that if someone, and I guess that goes back to the questions that were offered, what are factual? And I'm a bit concerned. This is where I'm unclear. Even about that letter, you made a statement and you said, you thought his letter was being disingenuous and it was trying to make this look bad. That was his opinion.
That it was plagiarized.
That part of it.
Mm-hmm.
But that still was your opinion about
We
the
always
facts.
look. If you haven't done it yet, Representative Phelps, you're new. You will, because there's no reason to recreate the wheel. If there's another state that's doing something better than we are, then you want to look at what they're doing and you want to improve it and bring it to Louisiana as well as you can. And that's what we did. I've done it on several occasions. Many people in this room have done the same thing. It's called best practices. You look for the best practices all over the country. You look the same thing we're doing with the ABC schools in the underserved areas and the C and D, the D and F schools in the underserved areas. Same thing. You look for the best practices. You look for what's working and what's providing the best opportunities for students. And that's what I did. I looked at other states, the legislation that they were proposing, and we took all that legislation, we crafted it the best way we thought it would work in Louisiana, and this is the result of that work. And it's an ongoing work. I've already said that.
Okay. And so let me go back to why I was referencing that. It was not for that reason. It seems as though you're going back and forth, contradicting yourself with the comment that when he wrote the letter, he made the statements. It was factual of where the information came from. But when you made the comment that it was disingenuous, he was trying to make you look bad.
I was talking about plagiarism. He accused me of plagiarism.
He did not say that.
That's what
he
it
stated
sounded
where
like
it
to
came
me.
from.
He said I plagiarized.
So that's an example of where facts can be turned into someone's opinion. So we're going right back to what
Okay.
I thought you were trying to.
All right.
But
then I
you see what I'm
plagiarized.
saying?
I did. I plagiarized from other states. No question about it. I did it. We all do it.
But do you get my point, though?
Do I get your point? No, I don't think so.
This is my point. That was factual what he wrote. Mm-hmm. Okay, but it
Well, it was
you
factual.
it became
It was factual to one extent. He said that I had plagiarized from the Trump executive order. I didn't even know the Trump executive order existed when I wrote this legislation. I modeled. I told you, Florida, Iowa, Ohio, New Hampshire,
Right.
and Missouri.
But I was
Those
just
are
trying
the
to
5
use that
states
as
I
an
modeled.
example. Maybe I should have said that. I'm using that as an example of that was still factual, and that's a.
It wasn't
it called
factual because I didn't model it. I didn't even know that the former president had written an executive order to deal with this.
Okay, I'm gonna leave that example alone. Okay, the last question you had, and I'll just for the sake of time, but the help you said if we have anything that would help you with this bill, the offer that I have would still let Bessie and the Department of Ed, if these things are happening in our schools, where someone's opinion is, I heard everything, and I want to go back to this. I don't think this is about saying that America is a racist country. I've heard that a lot right here. That kind of turns the tide from what we're talking about in Louisiana, correct? That's not the topic of no. Wait. That's not what was being taught in the schools. You're saying, because you referenced this in all subjects. You didn't just say history, correct?
I'm talking about teaching those terms anywhere in the education system,
Okay.
regardless of what the class is. But I'm primarily concerned about civics, social studies, and history. Yes.
Okay. Well, again, I just want to offer my support in just saying, since it's not a problem here, since you
Well,
stated
I
you say
can't
you
acknowledge that it's not a problem. I can tell you that I haven't seen any direct reports that it's a problem. I've received anecdotal evidence that I can't produce at this table. That's the best way I can respond to that question.
with all of the opposition and reasonings for opposition to this bill from, I can tell you, I know we got tons of emails, as it relates to just the facts of how the country was founded, how things happen here in Louisiana. The questions that you were not able to answer for Rep. Carter, that was disappointing because we were just looking for a public recognition of history there.
I'm sorry that
So
you're
that-
disappointed by
yeah,
that,
I
but
was.
the fact that I'm not a history professor and I'm not an expert on the history of Louisiana, I'm sorry to
No, but
disappoint
with-
you on that. I'll do better in
No,
the
you
future,
did
Representative
disappoint me.
Phelps, to educate myself on specific points of history, especially if I know the questions are going to be answered. I'll definitely
But
do
you
that.
do ask us to be open and honest, and I mean, I didn't have to be a part of slavery to know that my ancestors were.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't going through the back door at a restaurant, but my father did. So I didn't have to be in his shoes to know that. It was facts because he told me.
And I never
And the
disputed it. In
history-
fact, I just said that the specific questions that Representative Carter were asking me about Louisiana, I haven't researched.
I think, but you know
I
the
was
answer,
never.
though. I know.
I haven't
come on.
researched and I'm not qualified to give a definite answer on any of those issues. If you're talking about slavery, I'll never sit here and deny slavery. I'll never sit here and deny that we have racism in the United States right now. There's no question we have racism in the United States right now. Do we need to stop looking at it? I mean, of course not. We need to do everything we can to prevent it. But is it systematic? Is it institutional? I need to see more evidence of that today.
Okay, well, thank you for acknowledging the disappointment for not answering the question. Thank you.
Mr. Bernard, did you want?
Sure.
Do you mind, Mr. Vice Chair?
I don't know if you don't mind, just hold. That's not going to be. I just wanted to hear from the chairman at this point.
Clear some points up.
No, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Representative Phelps gets the director questions. Let's go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, are we done, Representative Phelps? Yes, sir. Okay, thank you. Before I call on Representative Jefferson, and this is not directed towards him, we've got a lot of red and green cards to pop up. I'll remind everybody that it's 11 o'clock. We've got other bills to do, and he has already told us he's going to voluntarily defer it, so there will be no vote today. So please feel free to ask your questions and make your points, but I just want to remind everybody.
But excellent discussion.
Point
Representative Jefferson.
of order, clarification, Mr. Vice Chairman. We mentioned earlier a time limit. Are we going to impose that, or are we just going to proceed accordingly? Because I know with all that you just indicated, it's a lot of discussion still.
Sure. I have not received a motion yet. I think we historically. Yeah. Hold on. Let me finish this. We historically in this committee, I know we have a 3 to 5 minute. I have not received a motion. Mr. Representative Edmonds has discussed it and just made one.
Okay.
So after your moment, after your time,
Okay.
we're going to impose that.
Wait, is that subject to debate? The motion to.
It can be if you object to the motion.
Only reason, I mean, I'm on the mic.
Hold on. Rookie mistake. What can I say?
No, you're doing fine, Mr. Acting Chair. And this is just we heard a lot from the advocates of the bill, and we had no time limit from them as they talked and advocated for their position. I want to make certain we hear from the people who are opposed to this bill without putting any sort of limitation on them. We got lectured this morning from the advocates of it. I want us to be educated from those who are opposed to it. So I object to the imposing of a time limit as we're about to get into the opposition of it. Let's have a free, honest conversation. Mr. Chairman, you said you wanted to have a conversation on it. Let's hear from both sides, because if not, then that would be violative of, I think, part of the things where you only hear from one side and not the other side. So I therefore object to any sort of limitation at this time. Thank you.
Okay, we've got a motion and an objection, and my understanding
is
is
it a debatable motion? It's debatable?
yes.
Then I would say, Representative Carter, and I agree with you. You can tell from my being chairman that I don't like to limit debate at all. So I agree with your premise. However, I do understand that some members are concerned about time limits. So what I would suggest and what I think I would want to do is we can bring up everybody else who comes up to testify. Whatever time limit you guys decide is appropriate. But when the opponents come to the table, for the primary opponents, like we're the primary proponents, that would give them whatever unfettered time that you guys deem is necessary. But for everybody else, we have a time limit. If you think that works.
I don't know. Let's just keep going for now, and I'd rather get into the substance of it and not get thrown off with a long, drawn-out debate about process. But for now, I just say we keep going as is with no limitation, because we've heard without any sort of limitation from the advocates. So I want to start the process of hearing from the opposition before I agree to any sort of time restraints.
If we do that, though, we're going to get
but this is like 5 minutes we lost that we could have been hearing from the opposition. So I'd rather get to that than have this
Gentlemen,
debate.
let me. We have a motion. We have an objection.
How
It's
many cards?
debatable. Let's vote. We got a lot of cards. This is to speak.
To speak. That's
This
the
is
point. So
Just here again.
Fair enough. But, listen, when we have appropriations, when we're considering things of importance to the state, we go to the floor, we come back. I think this is a conversation that's worthy to be had. Let's have it. So with that, let's continue to go. I want to hear from the opposition.
Yeah. Representative Edmonds, hold on.
I have said on appropriations with you for 6 years, so I totally agree. However, I'm trying to follow the premise that we were given. This bill apparently is going to be the possibilities of a variety, if not overwhelming amount of amendments as possible. And you've already mentioned that to us, out of no disrespect to your bill, Mr. Chairman, as you well know of how I feel. But with that said, we're not even certain what the opponents or more proponents would be. Mr. Chairman, you said you wanted to give these that came from out of town the opportunity to do this, and then you got to go back and work on the bill. So I am not in saying that we shouldn't have an opportunity for however long that takes. But we don't even know what the bill is going to look like, and we're going to sit here and debate for hours over what we don't even know you're going to amend. So my feeling is that we have done what he asked to do. He's going to voluntarily defer the bill, and I make a motion that we invoke the 3-minute rule.
Okay, we've got a motion, an objection. Any other?
Thank you.
Representative Brass, do you want to debate the motion, or you wanted to ask questions later? Okay, let's do the motion first. Okay, the motion is for limiting advocacy for 3 minutes. Please call the roll. Which one is yours? Which one is yours? All right, there we go. Yes, sir. No, you're not here. You're not on. No, you're not showing up here. Okay, before we count, let's go. Representative Tarver.
I'm just trying to figure out what's going on.
We have a motion to limit debate for 3 minutes. We have an objection. We're going to vote on it. Well, not debate, discussion from those who are coming. Pros and cons. Right. And I mean, I think everybody that knows the history of this committee knows we traditionally adopt this for very highly let's just see, highly debatable bills, let's say.
So, question on what are we going to do about these other folks? That still, we're going to, I don't know, we opened this can of worms, so we're kind of stuck with it. So, I don't know if maybe we ought to dismiss these other guys till tomorrow or something, or we owe it to this. I mean, I don't want to be talking about this, but we here, and we might as well fulfill our obligation to listen to it thoroughly. And
No,
if so,
it's on.
those other guys are sitting around here waiting. I don't know if we need to ask them all if they want to voluntarily defer to tomorrow or something so they can be released. I just hate to see those sit around.
May I-
We're going to go until like we go to session at 2 o'clock, and then we're going to come back, like y'all said. That's what happens. And if that's what happens, I'm okay with that. I got nothing to do. I mean,
Representative Tarver, no, I mean, we're going forward today. Just so it's clear, if we adopt the motion, it just limits testimony to 3 minutes, which I think most people are comfortable doing. I know there's an objection, but it's not like we wouldn't give people an opportunity. I'm just saying that to clarify the information, not to argue for or against. So
But this is a debatable motion.
it is.
And that's what we're doing. May I make a substitute motion that we invoke the 3-minute rule for everyone but the primary table?
Listen,
Whoever
Wait,
you know, the
the-
primary opponents come up, then you handle.
I don't know that
anything.
we have primary opponents. We've got primary, secondary, and tertiary opponents.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
but there's no one
part of the-
representing the opponents.
part of the problem is we've heard for 2 hours from one side, and now we're going to impose a 3-minute rule.
Well,
and
that's
so,
why, yeah.
and so that's why I objected. That's not usually in the history of this committee, and I was pleasure to serve on in my first term, is when we have controversial bills, and Rick Evans, you're nodding along, we will set that 5-minute rule at the very beginning, and it'll apply to everyone. Here we're changing the rules in the middle of the game to the detriment of those opposed to it. So for that, I object to the 3-minute rule. I've debated it. We can vote. Because I really want to get to the opposition instead of a debate about process.
Ms. Banks, let's call the roll.
You're not recognizing the substitute motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Substitute motion, please. Go ahead, Representative Chairman.
I withdraw.
I mean, Mr. Chair. Okay. Substitute motion withdrawn. Okay. Representative Amity.
I
the
just wanted
substitute.
to suggest a substitute motion that we somehow put this one on the table, put it aside, or pause it, handle the other bills on the agenda that all the other people are waiting for, and then come back to this one, even if it means that we come back to this one after session.
If I can respond.
Representative Carter.
I mean, for the first 2 hours today, I had someone who, when I asked whether or not the state of Louisiana had a history of racism, didn't even acknowledge slavery. So I've heard that. Oh, hold up. I heard that for 2 hours. I don't want to break a pause. I want to hear from the other side in real time. So that's why I pose it, and let's call the roll. If I lose, I lose.
Representative
But let's
Carter,
call
this
the
is a
roll.
substitute motion. Are you objecting to the substitute motion?
I want to know whatever the proper procedure is for us to continue to have a free and open debate on this subject matter, to hear from all sides. That's what I'm in favor of. So I don't know. You tell me in terms of.
I'm going to take that
point of
as
order.
an objection to the substitute motion. And Ms. Banks, let's call the roll. The substitute motion is to handle other bills first and then to come back to finish debate for this bill, correct? Okay. And my assumption, I assume that means there would be no time limits for testimony.
I'm not including any time limit in this motion.
Right, that's what okay. Representative Brass.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a note. I know that Chairman Garofalo had actually contacted, I know myself, individuals who had bills slated for today that we may go into tomorrow. So, like I say, I can't prepare to hear my bill today, but I was under the perception that it would be heard tomorrow. So I'm sure he did that to all the other authors. So
I did.
In line with I'm about to call him Congressman Carter, but Representative Carter, I would ask that, as in an echo what Representative Tarver said, let's just kind of stay where we are, and if we need be, let's move. Ask the other authors to be prepared to come back tomorrow.
Representative Hilferty.
I had a question.
Okay. Fair enough. Okay, so if I'm keeping track well, we have a substitute motion. There's been an objection to it. The substitute motion is basically here are other bills and come back for everything else. Ms. Banks, call the roll, please.
Chairman Garofalo
No.
votes no.
Voting on the substitute motion.
Representative Amadei votes yes. Representative Brass votes no. Representative Carter votes no. Representative Edmonds votes no. Representative Freeman. Representative Freiberg votes no. Representative Hilferty votes no. Representative Jefferson votes no. Representative Owen votes no. Representative Phelps votes no. Representative St. Blanc votes no. Representative Tarver votes no. Representative Wright
No.
votes no. 1 yes, 12 no.
Okay, so now we're going to return to the original motion, which is to limit testimony to 3 minutes going forward. There's been an objection by Representative Carter. Ms. Banks, please call the roll.
Representative Edmonds made the motion. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then Representative Carter
Objected.
Representative Garofalo votes no. Representative Amadei votes no. Representative Brass votes no. Representative Carter votes no. Representative Edmonds votes yes. Representative Freeman votes no. Representative Freiberg votes yes. Representative Hilferty votes no. Representative Jefferson votes no. Representative Owen votes yes. Representative Phelps votes no. Representative St. Blanc votes no. Representative Tarver votes no. Representative Wright votes no. 3 yes, 11 no.
Okay, we move forward. I'm trying to keep track of where we were. I have one button push. Is that you, Representative Tarver? I think we have you mislabeled. I think that's the problem.
It's the other mic.
He should be number 3. He should be number 3.
That's it.
Try it.
Yeah, my question may be like too late or something, but since it was pushed and the wrong one was pushed, but I wanted to know if we voted no to limit debate now, can we come back later and ask to limit debate later?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, Representative Hilferty.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Chairman Garofalo, you mentioned you received specific examples from residents of Louisiana without naming names or even locations. Can you give examples of what they told you?
Yeah, they're telling. Primarily, it was employees and teachers telling me that they're being forced to take trainings that are advocating for these theories. That are. I don't want to say anything I shouldn't say, but
you're not. I mean, we're giving
I know.
like,
that's the primary focus of it. The parents that I spoke to are giving me examples of handouts that they're being given.
Like, what does the handout say?
Handouts saying, United States is a racist country, that corporations are, inherently racist and have a bias against.
Can you share examples of these with the committee?
Not without jeopardizing the privacy of the people that gave them to me.
I mean, you could redact that information, I would imagine.
No, but if I give you the specific, you could tell where it came from, and I can't do it. So I promised not to do it. They've implored me not to do it. So it was only a few examples. It wasn't a lot, but they were there, and that's
okay. So you cannot give us.
It was given out. Not as not for the truth of the statements that were in the assignment, but it was given out as a punctuation assignment, so that you were supposed to punctuate the statements, and that's the way it was given out. So it wasn't like a history class.
I think many of us would appreciate seeing that if you could redact out the
I will talk
information.
to the people that gave it to me and ask if they mind. There were examples on Facebook, and I saw them months ago, but if I can go back and find those, I'll get those to you as well.
Okay. Bessie is overviewing social studies curriculum this year, correct?
Yes.
Would that not be a time without the legislature coming in and not knowing the entire story for multiple sides to come? I know Rep. Duplessis had a bill last year that looked at how our students are taught certain things in history. Why would we not just engage in that process?
This is a bigger issue. This is dealing with more than just the social studies curriculum. This is dealing with curriculum in general. It's dealing with the environment for employees, teachers, and other employees alike, and it's dealing with higher ed administration, teachers, and employees. So this goes well beyond the scope of the study that's occurring right now for the curriculum, the social studies curriculum in K through 12.
But I think that's a part of it, and that would be a place where multiple parties could engage in what is being taught and how it is being taught.
Absolutely, and that's what's going on as far as the social studies curriculum goes. But the social studies curriculum does not touch the other areas that this bill does.
Let's talk about page 4, section E, line 21.
On the original bill?
This is the bill that you had marked up for us and sent us that shows the red line changes. So that might be a little different, but I think it is section E. It says nothing in the section but shall be construed to do any of the following: inhibit or violate First Amendment rights of students or employees, and or undermine intellectual freedom or freedom of expression, prevent a school from promoting racial, cultural, ethnic, intellectual, or academic diversity or inclusiveness if such efforts are consistent with the provisions of this section. Is that section it's referring back to the entire bill?
Yeah, that's when you use that term, when it's capitalized, it's referring to this section of law.
Section 3, Part 3 of this. Prohibited discussion of divisive concepts as part of a larger course of academic instruction. To me, what you're saying here contradicts much of the bill, and when I initially reviewed this bill, I found it confusing and hard to follow. And I think when we give it to a teacher in the classroom, I don't know how they are going to make this section E seems to contradict what you're saying in the rest of the bill. So what would you consider part of a larger course of academic instruction?
First off, if you go to page 4, line 16, it says D1, each school governing authority shall adopt policies and procedures for the investigation of complaints relative to noncompliance with this section. So the policies and procedures sets out what the policies and procedures should maintain. So the teachers won't get this bill. The teachers will receive the policies and procedures as set out by the district.
Okay, but let's go back to part 3 of this. Prohibit discussion of divisive concepts as part of a larger course of academic instruction. What does that mean?
Exactly what it says. I mean, the words on the page are if there's But
what is a larger course of academic instruction?
If you're having a discussion on whatever the case may be, on slavery, then you can talk about everything dealing with slavery, the good, the bad, the ugly,
There's no good to slavery, though.
Well, then whatever the case may be, you're right. I didn't mean to imply that, and I don't believe that, and I know that that's the case. But I'm using that good, bad, and ugly as a generic way of saying that you can teach any factually based anything, regardless.
None of us were around when slavery occurred. We can rely on the history that was written about that time. We can rely on primary documents that we have found, but nobody sitting here on the earth was around when the United States had slavery. So I just
none of us were alive when most of history was written.
History is constantly being written. It is a fluid concept.
How can history? A fact is a fact. So I don't understand what you mean by a fluid. Please explain to me what you mean by a fluid concept.
I'm saying history is yesterday. History is 2 days ago.
And what occurred. That's exactly what I'm saying. We agree on that.
But we can experience the same event and potentially have differing views. I mean, you know that as an attorney, that witness testimony can vary. I just, it comes back to there are divisive concepts that are taught in the larger course of academic instruction, and the first part of this bill seems to contradict the ability that you're allowing them to teach divisive concepts as a part of a larger course of academic instruction. And I think that's when many of the opponents have had trouble reconciling those two ideas.
When you teach a concept and you're giving all sides of the concept, and I'll
but
tell
let's
you,
take
there's no good side to slavery. I get that. I don't think anybody in this room would argue that fact. I'd be really shocked if they did. But if there's a different concept that you're trying to teach, you teach the concept. You teach as it was conceptually brought in, and you don't give a personal opinion. You don't give a politically based, ideologically based opinion. You teach what occurred, what is generally accepted by the historians in the area, and what's proscribed by the curriculum that the district has chosen.
Which is what we are studying with the Bessie overview coming up.
Exactly, correct. Yes, that's exactly right.
So then that can be a part of that conversation. But I think there are some events that have occurred that there is no other side to teach, that many... the Anti-Defamation League contacted me about this bill, and they're very concerned with the teachings of what happened during the Holocaust and what happened in Nazi Germany and the atrocities that happened. There is no good side to that. I don't know how you would teach a rounded perspective of that.
If it's factually based in what's generally accepted as being a fact of what occurred in history, you can teach it. I'm just saying you don't take a personal position. You don't bring political ideology in to influence that course of study, whether it's math, history, and that, again, to get back to your question about the curriculum study that's going on right now, that's dealing strictly with social studies. It doesn't deal with any of the other courses of instruction, nor will that touch the training and the different whatever the teachers and the staff are receiving.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Hilferty. Representative Brass.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. I'm going to be real brief because most of my questions have been asked and answered by previous committee members. But Representative Garofalo, the two gentlemen that actually was there.
And I apologize.
Earlier.
We were debating the motions. Excuse me, Representative Brass, but I wanted to let the committee know that the gentleman had flights, so they had to leave. He wanted to say something, and thank you guys for letting him testify. But I didn't want to interrupt the discussion on the procedural issues.
Did they think we were going to finish early?
No, but they didn't think they'd be at the witness table that long.
So they both mentioned, I jotted down the different areas across the country as far as where they have seen or are seeing currently issues in reference to this legislation. He mentioned Buffalo, Virginia, Washington, D.C., New York, North Carolina, California, and Illinois. He did mention one from New Orleans I was going to get with Representative Carter, so we'll definitely drill down deeper into that particular issue. But to my knowledge, and I think I have a great relationship with our Commissioner Reed of Higher Education, Superintendent Brumley, the 5 superintendents, actually 8 superintendents throughout the river parishes, most of my school board members, a lot of the teachers throughout the river parishes. I personally don't see this issue. The issue that I do see in some cases is that where, and it just bringing back some attention to the bill, that one race or sex is inherently superior or inferior to another race, or that either the United States of America or the state of Louisiana is fundamentally, institutionally, or systematic racist or sexist. I do not see that problem in the classroom or in our school system or in our university, but I do see it in some cases in some of our homes outside of our the classroom, which ultimately may get brought into this particular setting. So my question to you, being that we have not heard any issues from Department of Education, Board of Regents, Association of Superintendents, the Teachers Association, and you did mention that you were being advised. So my question is, who is advising you? Is it somebody from the state of Louisiana? Is it somebody from higher ed? Because my base question is, I don't see the issue. A lot of representatives up here has expressed that feeling where we don't see the issue. So who's advising you to bring this legislation forward?
Well, first off, the legislation is proactive in nature. It's not necessarily, and I've stated that already, I'm not trying to correct a problem that I can enumerate at this table. I believe that there's some problems because, as I said, people have reached out to me and enumerated that, but it's nothing I can present to you at this table. So I'm not going to mischaracterize what's going on. And your specific question about who's advising me?
Yes.
The gentlemen who were here, the gentleman with the Heritage Foundation. I have someone at the Alliance Defending Freedom. I'm dealing with several faith-based groups. I'm dealing with that's the groups that are formally advising me.
So is that group?
I've spoken to members. I've spoken to the legislative delegation from Bessie who are opposed to this. I've spoken to the one of the members of the unions, and the unions are opposing it. I've spoken to the Superintendents Association, which is also opposing this. I've spoken to most of the groups that will be affected by
So it
this.
sounds like everybody from Louisiana, other than you,
you know
is
what?
opposing it.
Everybody except
So it
the
sound like
people that are asking me to move forward with it, yes. And I could get into the political reasons why, but that's not for me to say. I'll let them come up and plead their case when they get to the microphone. But a lot of people who are in favor of this are terrified. I can't use any other word, but terrified of repercussions from their peers, their colleagues, their supervisors, their school boards, if they come and say that they're concerned about this situation in our institutions in Louisiana.
Okay. Representative Hilverton kind of mentioned, because I was going to ask the question, if you can give some examples of the concerns that teachers or whoever was given to you. So just kind of looking at it from a different angle, I'm going to give you a couple scenarios. And if you would be able to say if this would be in compliance to this legislation or not in compliance.
Sure, as long as it's not going to pigeonhole anyone that may have called
So if
me.
a teacher was to say President Obama was the first black president of the United States, would that be in compliance or
Of
out
course.
of compliance? In compliance?
That's a fact. It's a fact, yes.
Representative Selders has a bill to recognize Juneteenth celebration. So if that passed into legislation, a teacher wanted to do a study session on Juneteenth, would that be in compliance with this?
Regardless of whether that passes or not, if what occurred in June, as long as it's factually based, is absolutely able to be taught. Again, anything that's factually based, that's generally recognizable, and there's a term for it, and I don't remember the term that they use to describe what history classes are supposed to be taught from, but there's a term for it, and I can look it up and give it to you. As long as it's generally recognized and it fits the curriculum that's prescribed by the Department of Education and accepted by the district where the students are being taught.
Okay. So if some students want to choreograph a skit or dance illustrating their perception of black history for a black history program, which may not be factual in its entirety as far as actuality, would that be in compliance or not in compliance with this legislation?
I would say that if it's a program outside of the classroom that is not factual, then it wouldn't be in compliance.
Okay. I guess my last deal with that piece, Representative Royce Duplessis brought a HR 55, I think, one of the sessions on last year, and you as chairman put it on record that you would work with him to move that bill, that legislation, that idea forward. And I'm going to read the description of it, and I want you to tell me, would that be in compliance or not in compliance of this legislation? It reads, request that the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education study the history of racism, racism's effect on the public education, and anti-racism education, and creates a task force for the development of recommendation for implementing such education in reference to education within education, and that education. So would that be in compliance, being how it's worded, or not in compliance with your current legislation?
Well, first off, this legislation would have nothing to do with the ability of a legislator to bring a resolution like that. And I've worked with, I spoke to Representative Duplessis yesterday about this. He asked a similar question, and what happened with that is we knew that we were going into the study of the curriculum for history and social studies, and because we knew that, I've asked the Department of Education. I set up a committee study. I think I told you this already, Representative Brass, so that we could have a few extra meetings to look at that without having to go into specifics on exactly where we're going to go with it. So we could look at those types of curriculum and what's being taught in history, social studies, and civics in the in our K through 12 schools. So when I talked to Dr. Brumley about it, he said, "Well, we're going into this overarched 7-year study of the social studies curriculum, which would include all of that." So what I did, I asked him, and I talked to Representative Duplessis before I did it, I asked him to look at that specifically when they're doing the overall study. And that's where we are with that. If you're asking if that study would fit this,
not necessarily the study, but if this study, this task force was to have some recommendations that were dealing with racism, and ultimately that those recommendations would be incorporated within the curriculum by the Department of Education. If it was to be incorporated, would that be in compliance or in non-compliance with this legislation?
As long as
being
it's
that
factual.
It's talking about racism.
Yeah, as long as it's factual. No, as long as it's factual.
How do you prove if racism is factual?
You have to. That's not for me to decide. But when you teach history, it has to be. It can't be a theory. Now you can teach a theory, but you have to teach it as a theory, not as fact. And we're having theory taught right now in the class. Again, in other areas, you're having theory taught in the classrooms that's not fact, and that's damaging our students, and it's hurting their chances for success. And it's saying that to certain races that because of the color of your skin, you're not as good as another student. And that's the goal of this legislation at its core, is to provide a discrimination-free environment that provides equal opportunity for every student in our classrooms. And if what I'm being told today is correct, and that teachers are not doing this, and that we're not requiring our staff to undergo any training that teaches or tries to implement theoretical issues, then the bill will just sit there. It won't have any effect at all. But if those instances start occurring, then that's when we would have to start looking at, well, are you teaching this theory as fact? That's the problem. They're teaching theory as fact. And if you don't have a solid basis, and again, I apologize, I don't remember the term. It's not generally acceptable. There's a term that they use in curriculum that describes how they derive what they believe is true. And that's the goal of this bill, so that we don't bring political theory and ideology into the classroom, and we're giving a discrimination-free environment to all students that's equal for equal opportunity.
Okay. My last question, Mr. Chair, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to answer this, but on page 3, starting in line 15, a reference to each school governing authority shall ensure.
You're looking at the original bill or the bill as amended?
The one that was in our packet.
Okay.
But I think regardless, it's on page 3.
Page 3. Which line?
Starting at 15, each school governing authority shall ensure the following. The training provided at each school under its jurisdiction shall foster a learning environment and workplace that is respectful for all students and employees. No training that teaches or advocates, promotes divisive concepts. Diversity and inclusion programs held at schools sponsored shall prohibit employees and students from discriminating against along those lines. So I'm gonna say it once again. I see this happening already in the school systems in my district. So what type of programs in other states where they are seeing these problems have been incorporated to prevent these items from happening?
I know that there are, as I've already stated, at least 5 states. Now, I heard last night that Texas is another state that's preparing legislation similar to this. So all I can tell you is that all the bills are similar to this bill, and I don't know specifics about what they're doing, but I can tell you that, again, we crafted this bill primarily from Florida and Iowa. So I would venture to say, now Iowa went a little bit further, and Iowa's bill actually covered all of state government, so that it would affect all of the administrative portion of state government. But Florida's bill, as far as I can recall, only dealt with education. So to answer your question specifically, all I can tell you is what I know from the bills that I read. I don't know what else they're doing in that regard.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Representative Brass. 2 quick points before I move to Representative Jefferson. Understand we have some Bessie members in the audience. Bessie President Holloway is with us. Just want to make sure, introduce her. And then Bessie Representative Castile, Mr. Castile. Are they still here? They just walked out. Okay, great timing, right. Okay. Another thing, Representative Freeman asked about the SACS accreditation. I got a text from Commissioner Reed's staff, basically said that has not been specifically determined, but SACS is certainly shares concerns about academic freedom and is monitoring the situation. So they have not said outright that they would lose accreditation. Representative Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Top of the morning to you, Mr. Chairman. Regarding this, I think much of the questions I had, I guess if you wait to the end, most of them will get answered.
Been there, done that.
But one of the questions that I have concern with is the autonomy, and you mentioned autonomy of our teachers. Having been in the classroom a long time ago, whenever there are discussions, ideas, that's the marketplace, and it's always inviting when a teacher can articulate something and then a student raises his or her hand and says, Mr. So-and-so, Professor So-and-so, I don't agree with you. And this is why I don't agree with you. Do you think that possibly this would stymie such intellectual discourse and debate? Because at the end of the day, we want our students to be creative in their thinking. We don't want them to be divisive. And the second aspect of it, I had 3 parts. Number one, and you've kind of hit with various.
Can we do them one at a time? So
okay,
I don't forget?
it's real easy.
First
okay,
off, we sat together on judiciary for a long time. I had no idea you were a teacher.
Okay.
So thank you for your service in the classroom, and that's a big deal.
Okay.
I appreciate that. I don't see specifically. Give me the specifics of your question again.
How do you see this stymieing that intellectual discourse?
No, in fact,
the creativity that we encourage our teachers. You've already articulated that you're trying to be proactive with this. There aren't problems. So I was going to ask you at one point, if Claiborne or Lincoln or Bienville, because you said you had individuals who were fearful. As far as retribution, if their names were to surface. So that was the first question. Would this stymie the creativity and the enhancement of our students exploring, the life of the mind? Ultimately, that's what it's all about.
No, I don't see that at all. In fact, again, as long as it's factually based, I think this would actually spur more conversation, because I'm hoping that professors will give more than one viewpoint on a subject. That's my goal, is to have students have as much information on a subject as they can possibly receive, so they can make an informed decision, to teach them how to be critical thinkers, so that they can think on their own. That's the goal. I don't want indoctrination, which would be the opposite, so that they're given one viewpoint as fact and to the exclusion of all others. I'm actually trying to promote more discussion. Okay. So to answer your question.
And also, last year when we dealt with tort reform, I asked a question when we were going through the pandemic. if this was the most, I guess, significant, thing that we could address during this pandemic. And invariably the answer was yes. So I'm asking you, with all that we've experienced and continue to experience, is this our best when it comes to, as Representative Carter mentioned, so many different challenges that we have in education? Is this something that's really not problematic at this point? Is this our best? Is this what we can do to ensure that we are ensuring that our young people are being given an opportunity where they will be able to go and scale the heights of life? Is this our best, this piece of legislation?
Look, I think you know that I'm very sensitive to all of those issues, but you've been here as long as I have. We came in together. Is there an ideal time to address any issue? That's not for me to say. What I can say is I see this occurring around the country. I've been notified that it's happening in certain areas in Louisiana. And I'm hesitant to say that because I can't give you evidence.
Okay.
But
so you
I
understand
believe,
our challenge
yeah,
that you can't.
I do. I fully do.
You've said it has to be factual.
I'm hoping.
And so
I'm
you're
hoping
saying
that you take my word for the facts that have been given to me.
Yes, sir.
That's all I can say on that issue. But I do believe it's something that we have to be proactive about because I have no doubt that there are certain factions in this country that are trying to infiltrate and indoctrinate our students. And I don't think. Look, you may doubt it, but I can send you article after article after article after article on these different topics. I can send you letters from parents that have been written to different school systems. Somebody sent me the other night. The Asian American group in San Diego has filed a complaint against the San Diego school system because of the training that's been given to teachers. And I was kind of appalled when I saw some of the slides that are being taught. I mean, it's a 37 megabyte document, or I would have sent it out.
Okay.
So it's pretty large. I'll be glad to share it, and I will share it with everyone on the committee so you can read it, because I think you'll be pretty surprised when you see it as well. So from my perspective, I know I've been approached by people who asked me to address this issue, and this is my attempt to address it. And the reason why I'm tabling it, not tabling it, the reason why I'm returning it to the calendar is because I found out new information last night that we're going to require some amendments on. And I talked, in speaking to the speaker this morning, he has a few issues that he wants me to address as well. So I'll be the first one to sit here and say it's not perfect, and we've had a lot of questions about that today, but we're trying to make it perfect, and I've already solicited input. So please, if you have some suggestions on how we can improve it, and look, if you don't believe that it's a problem elsewhere in the country, I will be glad to send you the research that I performed.
And I appreciate that. Two quick things, but again, we're focusing here on Louisiana.
Absolutely.
And pun intended, this is a teachable moment because you're relaying that it's based on facts, and yet you can't provide us with facts that this. Excuse me.
Yeah, I can provide you with facts around the country.
Okay.
I can't provide specific facts about Louisiana because I've been asked not to.
That's what they would call as paradoxical.
Well,
that's
I
a teachable moment that, again,
I understand that.
Yeah. And lastly, you also intimated a few minutes ago that perhaps if Bessie or, school board association, superintendents, they provide you information that this is not a problem, that you would, maybe you were not Freudian misspeak a few minutes ago, you would table it. Is that what you said, or did I miss that?
No, if I said table, I meant return to the calendar.
Okay.
And we had a pretty lengthy discussion yesterday, the leadership of Bessie, and I met with the School Boards Association. I've met with several of the entities that would be affected by this bill, and I understand some of the concerns, and a lot of people have asked me, is this a problem? And I have the same problem, not to be redundant, I have a problem in that I've been asked to not divulge names, any kind of personal information from the people who have approached me because they're afraid of retribution.
And that's that teachable moment.
I get that, and I understand what you're saying. And the only thing I can tell you up here is that
Trust you.
I can ask them to, well, that too, but
Of
I
course.
can ask them to reach out to you personally. I don't know if they'd be willing to do that. So
And
that's
I
not
would
the
submit
best I
to
can
you,
put
Mr. Chairman, that if that's an issue and you have indicated that it is, maybe we need to try to craft something as it relates to retaliation, and give them a means.
We thought about it. I didn't have time to do that, but we're looking at that as well.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Representative Jefferson. I'm going to go to Representative Tarver in a minute, but I just want to clarify. So this language in the bill, I know we recognize it was pointed out that it was in a President Trump executive order.
Which
I know
let me state again.
You didn't know that.
I
get
wasn't
that.
aware of it when we crafted the bill.
No, I understand. Okay, fair enough. My question is, has this legislation been offered or passed in any other state?
I
that
don't know
you're
the
aware of?
status. Florida, Iowa, Ohio, Missouri, New Hampshire, and I was told last night Texas.
Okay.
I haven't verified that on my own.
Okay, just want to get that fact out. All right, Representative Tarver.
You heard quick question. This is going to be so fast, you're going to believe it.
Thank goodness.
Just for me, I think it sounds to me like summarizing it into three things, three problems. The theory is being taught as fact. There's fear of retribution for challenging that, and there appears the potential for a wave across the country that's contrary to this. That kind of summarize it?
Yeah, and I'm not a fear mongerer, so I'm not trying to sit here and say, oh, this is coming to Louisiana. What I am saying is I've been told that some of this is already in Louisiana, but I can't enumerate that to you. But that it looks like it's a movement to try to infiltrate every school district in the United States. To me, that's what it looks like based on the research that I performed.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Representative Tarver. Okay, we're going to move on. There's no more questions. Chairman Garofalo, I understand there's a motion to voluntarily defer. Which one is that?
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chairman. I appreciate everything I've heard today. I just want to say for the record that I hear a lot of distortions, about my what the bill does and what I'm trying to do. But yes, I do move that we voluntarily defer this.
Okay, defer without objection.
Wait, I do have a substitute motion.
Okay, I was informed that we let the author defer and we don't accept objections to that. Is that correct?
Well, I just had a substitute motion. I wasn't objecting necessarily. I have
Okay, now hold on, I'm going to get you on. All right.
I have a substitute motion. I'm not objecting to the chairman's motion. I have a substitute motion that we involuntarily defer House Bill 564.
Do we have any objections? Yes.
One of the reasons why I voluntarily deferred was so that the members wouldn't have to vote. If you want to force a vote, we can go all the way. I don't think that that's fair, and that's why I did it.
I mean, with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, I mean, based upon the testimony and the evidence that we've heard today, I'm ready to proceed with my motion to involuntarily defer. And I understand that, everyone has to vote their conscience. Let it be a record vote. So I have a motion to involuntarily defer.
We have an objection from Representative Edmonds. Ms. Banks, call the roll. Hold on. Okay, I got Representative Phelps. I don't have your light on, Representative Tarver. Representative Phelps, go ahead, please.
And I had a question as well. I mean, if we have to take a vote, I understand that, but I did want to ask Mr. Chairman, would you be willing to, I know you said return to the calendar, defer it, but not bring it back this term based on the evidence today? I think that was a lot of indication of where we are. Would you take that in consideration of not bringing it?
That wasn't the intent. and that's not the commitments that I made. So I can't make that commitment at this point. And, I will say that a lot of people have left because I made the commitment to voluntarily defer. And I don't know that it's fair that we have this vote at this point. I would not have made that commitment had I known that this was going to occur. So, and we may have even had more testimony had that not occurred. I actually asked some of the people who wanted to testify to not take the committee's time because I knew I was going to voluntarily defer. So I'm opposed to involuntary deferral. I am in support of voluntarily deferring so we can continue to work on the issue.
Okay, sorry.
Other than hear the testimony, and I was just asking I wasn't prepared for all of that, even though we had a number of opposition emails. But I was going to say, just because I don't think anybody left just because it was going to be involuntarily deferred.
I know they did.
Okay, but the impact was still more than I think we all thought.
Well, we'd still be here tomorrow during testimony.
Okay, I was just. Okay, and I just was wondering if today's impact had any influence on your decision, and the answer is no. Regardless of.
Representative Tarver?
I forgot what I was going to.
Understandable under the circumstances. How about we go to Representative Freeman? Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. My question is, can you explain, our staff explain what a no vote is and what a yes vote is? Because when we have these oppositions and motions,
Sure.
I get
So-
a little bit confused, and it's been a long morning, afternoon.
Okay,
So-
we have a substitute motion on the table to involuntarily defer Chairman Garofalo's bill. We have an objection from Representative Edmonds, and the vote would be yes, involuntarily defer, no, would reject that motion. Representative Hilferty.
Thank you.
Sorry. Wait, were you done?
Tari back.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay, go ahead, Representative Hilferty.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. And Mr. Chairman, with all due respect, and you and I talked about this, and I understand you had conversations about the involuntary deferral, but I think there is a lot of work to be done on this bill. When I read the bill and what you and the proponent said at the table, I have a different interpretation of what I read. And when I did question you, I pointed out those sections of the bill that I think wholesale contradict other parts of the bill. And I don't think that's your intention, and maybe we have differences in reading it, but if there's that much ambiguity about it, and we're about to send it to our school system as a mandate, I think it deserves some thoughtful consideration, and that thoughtful consideration, as we all know, during the course of a session can sometimes be hard to achieve given the pace and given demands on time. And I think this is too important to our students, and to the people present in this room that we do have a thoughtful conversation about this. And I think one of the best places to start that is when Bessie overviews the curriculum for social studies. And so to Rep Phelps' point, if we can voluntarily defer this, but agree that it will not be brought up in what could potentially be a rushed manner later in the session, I think it would give some of our members a little bit of confidence in that it's not just being brought up back in a rushed manner. So I really do implore you to consider that. I understand that wasn't the conversations you had, but as we all know, things move quickly around here, and sometimes you don't have full conversations about every possible outcome of a bill. That's all I have, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Freiberg.
I just thank you, Mr. Chair, Acting Chair. Mr. Chair, I agree with Representative Hilferty. I think at this time, this bill is not ready for consideration, and I know you wanted it.
Let me comment. So look, to everybody here, the reason why I'm voluntarily deferring is not because I intend to, in the middle of the night, bring the bill back and try to spring it on everybody. The reason why I'm voluntarily deferring is so we can work on it. If it's not to a position where I feel comfortable bringing it, I'm not going to bring it. But I want to continue the conversation, and I think this is the best way to do it. You and I, we all know that if we involuntarily, or if I commit to not moving the bill further, that the discussions are going to stop. It happens every time. And until, a year down the road, the discussions won't start again. I want the discussions to continue. I agree with everything Rep. Edmonds said. He couldn't have stated it better than I could. I wish I had his eloquence, and I mean that in every respectful way. I really think that this is an issue that we have to address. It has to be addressed. And again, we've heard a lot of mischaracterizations today. And I want to make sure that the conversation continues. And for me, the best way to ensure that the conversation continues is for this bill to be out there. And I want to make it better. I want to fix it. I want people to come to me with their ideas. I don't want people to get the idea, oh, we beat that. It's not an issue for us, because it is an issue. And we have to keep people coming to the table. And I believe this is the best way to do it. You can, if you hit add, Mark, it'll put them both on.
Hold on one second. Okay, so Representative Hilferty, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, and Mr. Vice Chair, thank you. But Mr. Chairman, you're the chair of the House Education Committee. If you are saying this is a priority, and we have this many people passionate out in the audience, I think they're going to understand that this is not. I don't think they're going to disperse and say, oh, it's done. But again, I go back to the fact that this takes thoughtful consideration and input from all the parties. I go back to the fact that Bessie is having this discussion. I think the table is set there for a start of this conversation. But again, I think if you called the parties to the table as the chairman of education, I can't imagine they would not be there.
Okay, Representative Freiberg, sorry, I thought you were done. I apologize.
Yes, sir. No, I wasn't. I actually was interrupted, but Mr. Chair, you have the right to do that. I can't help but think this bill, because it depends so much on Bessie acting, and Bessie at this point has not supported the bill. And I don't think, because of the requirements that will be made of Bessie, that it's in the posture right now that it can be acceptable. And I'm very torn, because I understand what you're trying to do, and I understand that there were people that would have testified had they stayed. But I'm not sure we can get this bill in the correct posture this session. So I'm very torn as to what to do. But
Okay, Representative Tarver.
I remember. I actually wrote it down. Do we honor each other's commitments? And the gentleman had every intention and strategy to go through what we've been through, and I feel like, I'm ready to vote. I'm okay with that, but the thoughtful consideration is absolutely going to take place, and I think he deserves the opportunity to see if he can resuscitate and give this thing the kind of life that he thinks it needs, and to take it out of his. I have every confidence that if he doesn't think he can move it forward, he's going to withdraw it, and that's the way it works, I think.
I'll make that commitment, absolutely.
So I guess if we need to vote on your substitute motion, we need to. But I just think it was a commitment that we had agreed to, and that's why I was willing to sit here for 5 hours instead of doing something a long time ago. So that's why I feel like we're making a little mistake in his honor. But okay, that's
Representative Edmonds.
This is my 6th year on this committee, and this will be the first time that we have had an author go to the table to volunteer defer a bill, and that although we did not vote, and although we did not agree to anything, I think that upon us, my vote today and my objection has nothing to do with content. It has what we do, it's process. This is what we've done. This is what we do in most of our committees. If there's a way for us to allow our authors to volunteer defer, we did it yesterday in appropriations for one of our colleagues. And I'm not making a plea for the bill at all. But there are times when we know we understand something. I think we understood from the beginning that we were hearing a bill that was going to be voluntary deferred, and now we're going to change direction. I will not do that. I do not object because of content. I object today because I believe in the process of what we say, that a bill goes through a process, good or bad, up or down, and we make those decisions. And I'm confident that our chairman will make that decision. And so again, I hope that we will do what we began 5 hours ago. I hope we will do what I believe we thought we were going to allow to be done. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Representative Phelps.
Yes, sir. And I just want to say for the record, I do understand and appreciate your comments, Rep. Edmonds. We did understand that it would be deferred. However, the content does matter to me. Hearing the content today, hearing Bessie, and I understand, I'm just saying my opinion here and why I asked for correction. I did mean if you would bring it back next session, not next term, just for clarity for the record as well. But that was very concerning hearing from 3 Bessie members at the end of the day who oversees our education system. And I'm asking that I hope it would be that important to sit down with them before bringing it back. I don't think there's time, agreement with everyone else, Rep. Hereford and Rep. Freiberg. I don't know if there'll be enough time. I don't even want to sit through another one like this, to be honest, but if I have to, I will. But to hear that today and respect the people who come and who we represent, that said a lot. And so I'm asking if you would defer through the next term, next session, because I don't, another month just with where they are, and there's so much ambiguity in the whole bill. We still don't know your intent says one thing, but what it does is another. It takes a lot. So I'm asking again, will you please consider and say your voluntary deferment will not be this session?
Question?
Yes, sir.
Me on. Again, Representative Phelps, I've made commitments to people, and I'm not going, just like I would never renege on a commitment that I make to you or anybody else on this committee or anybody else in this body. I'm not going to renege on those commitments. You know, I don't have everybody here today. I can't ask them if they would mind if I do this. So to that extent, I can't agree to that. You know, if we're going to vote, let's vote. You know, I mean, you guys vote your conscience. I respect what everybody does in here. I'm not one of those guys who's going to take retaliation. I'll never do that. I understand what everybody's saying. I understand the gravity of the testimony that we've heard today. And I've told you, I've given you my commitment that the bill won't come back unless we get it in a better posture. So if that's not good enough for you, I understand. Let's vote. I'm ready.
And a better posture would mean,
I'm not going to. I can't define it specifically because I have to.
no, I just want to know when you bring it back. We'll hear the same another 5 hours, however long it takes when you bring it back, right?
Right, I'm sorry.
Okay. But I'm saying, well, maybe may I ask this question? Maybe I should be a little bit more precise because this has a lot to do with my vote, and I respect you as chairman. If Bessie still does not agree with when you decide to bring it back this session, will you still bring the instrument back to the committee?
I've asked Bessie to work with me to make the bill better.
And if they do not,
well, it depends. It depends on if it, depends. That's all I can tell you. I can't commit that I will wait for a yes or an up or down vote from Bessie for me to bring back a policy to this body where we set the policy and not Bessie.
Thank you. Members, I just I'm speaking just to close on my motion. We've heard 5 hours worth of testimony. In most of our hearings, most of our legislation, we don't get nowhere near 5 hours worth of testimony to hear a piece of legislation. I think we've heard from representatives from across various interest groups to opine, and I think Representative Brass had the comment of the day when he said, "Sounds like everyone in the state of Louisiana is opposed to this." And we've heard from Betsy, we've heard from the educators, we heard from everyone else. And listen, and I'm very respectful of this institution. I am, and not once have I ever moved to involuntarily defer a chairman's bill. But with all due respect, Mr. Chairman, the substance matter, and this is a bad bill based upon the evidence that we heard. So I kindly ask that we involuntarily defer this bill, and I call for the vote.
Representative Freeman? Okay, all right. Ms. Banks, please call the roll. Okay, we're voting on a substitute motion from Representative Carter to involuntarily defer Chairman Garofalo's bill.
Chairman Garofalo votes no. Representative Amadei votes no. Representative Brass votes yes. Representative Carter votes yes. Representative Edmonds votes no. Representative Freeman votes yes. Representative Freiberg votes no. Representative Hilferty votes yes. Representative Jefferson votes yes. Representative Owen votes no. Representative Phelps votes yes. Representative St. Blanc votes yes. Representative Tarver votes no. Representative Wright
No.
votes no. It is tied.
Okay, so the motion fails. Okay, we got a motion to voluntarily defer without objection. Move on.